Okay, so good morning everyone. Welcome to our first COVID talk. Pamilya at Pandemiya, the effects of COVID-19 pandemic on the relations and dynamics of Filipino families. So this is something really very personal to every one of us since lahat tayo ay may pamilya at makaka-relate talaga tayo dito. And it's something that is very good to understand, especially in this time of compassion. So again, good morning everyone. I'm Tidri Sen and I will be your host for today. So today's event is co-presented by the UP College of Home Economics, the UP Department of Family Life and Child Development, the UP Department of Home Economics Education, in partnership with UST Electrical Engineering Circuit, UST Industrial Engineering Circle, the Street Classroom, UP Student Council, IEEE UP Diliman, Philippine Association of Nutrition Alpha Chapter, Ateneo Special Education Society, in cooperation with UST Association of Civil Engineering Students. And this event is also brought to you by UP Broadcasters Guild, UST Sociological Society, UP Preschool Practitioners, the UP Pre-Med Honor Society, Ateneo Collegiate Society of Advertising, UST Artlets Economic Society, PAFT Alpha, UP Samahan Tungo sa Progresibong Administrasyon, UP-STPA, and UP Anthropological Society. So, yun yung mga partners natin for today's meeting, and I hope you guys enjoy this webinar because this will be truly informative for everyone. Before we begin our webinar, we would like to following house rules. So we would like to remind you to please mute your microphone and to prevent distracting the speakers and of course the other attendees as well. We would also like you to turn off your video to prevent internet delay during the webinar. Second, in case of low bandwidth or a slow internet connection, you may opt to view our webinar live stream on YouTube. The link will be posted on the screen. And due to the limitations of Zoom, only the first 500 attendees would be accommodated, and the other attendees you wish to invite, your friends, your families, your loved ones, you may ask them to watch our YouTube live stream. Next, for questions, you may for Zoom participants, you may use the chat box. And for the YouTube attendees, please comment down below your questions and we will make sure to track them down later on. So we would also like to inform you that this Zoom webinar would be recorded. So please accept the question on your screens right now if you would wish to continue. Next, after the webinar, you will be redirected to a forum or to a evaluation form wherein you could really help us improve on our next webinar. So we are asking you to please answer this webinar, and then after doing so, answer the forum or answer the evaluation form of the webinar, and then you will be given a certification of participation after you answer that evaluation form. So now, may we, feel free to feel comfortable because we will be starting our webinar by by calling on Spotlight our Dean Shirley Guevara, to welcome us to this first COVID webinar. Let us react with the applause sign, with the applause and the participants. If you would like to do so, let us now welcome our Dean.
Thank you, Tidri. Good morning, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to this webinar, Pamilya at Pandemiya, Effects of the COVID-19 Pandemic on the Relations and Dynamics of Filipino Families. Gustong-gusto ko tong theme na to because it captured the very essence of being a family in this time of pandemic. Indeed, the importance of the family and the home have come to the fore as the pandemic slowly unfolded before our very own eyes. As we started navigating this unfortunate situation, we have witnessed how the home served as a refuge of the family members, enabling them to become resilient, resourceful, and enterprising. These are just some of the very virtues that home economics is espousing through its 99 years of existence in the University of the Philippines. Our tradition of excellence in finding ways on how to help improve the lives of the family is nearing its 100 years on November 12, 2021. So next year we are celebrating our centennial year. So I'd like to say that I consider this forum as a fitting tribute to the family and as a prelude to our centennial celebration. So at this point, I'd like to congratulate the organizers, the lead, Che, particularly the officers led by Ms. Regine Yu, the members and their advisor, Ms. Nicole Jacinto, the Department of Home Economics Education, and the Department of Family Life and Child Development, represented by their chairpersons and faculty. Assistant Professor Princess Jill Meneses, Coordinator of the Student Relations Office, and all the partner organizations or companies and institutions. Natutuwa ako kasi napakadami pala ng mga co-organizers dito at hindi ko na iisa-isahin. Maraming salamat sa inyong participation. So, ito ay para sa pamilyang Pilipino. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you for that, Dean Guevara. And we are truly reminded that this is for the Filipino community. And with that, we will be starting our talk with our first speaker. He is a licensed professional teacher and instructor in the Department of Family Life and Child Development Department, College of Home Economics, UP Diliman. He graduated magna cum laude with a bachelor's degree in Family Life and Child Development and is currently taking his MA in Psychology in the College of Social Sciences and Philosophy under the University of the Philippines, Diliman. Let us all welcome Mr. Edgar G. Belda Jr.
Hello po. And sige. So, magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Ako po si Teacher Edgar. Ako po ang unang speaker natin ngayong umaga. So, maraming salamat po sa organizers for inviting me for this event. And I hope na marami po tayong makuha na helpful para sa ating mga pamilya ngayong time ng pandemic. So, share ko na po yung aking presentation. Nakikita niyo po ba? Sige po. So, ngayon po, ang pag-uusapan po natin ay ano ba yung mga iba't ibang sitwasyon ng pamilya ngayong panahon ng pandemya. Tapos nagbibigay din po ako ng onting tips para sa mga families na maaari niyo pong magamit kung paano po ba papanatilihin ang magandang relasyon sa loob ng inyong mga pamilya ngayong panahon ng pandemya. So dagdagan ko lang din po yung pagpapakilala sa akin kanina ng ating host, no? So ako po ulit si Teacher Edgar. Ako po ay membro ng faculty ng Department of Family Life and Child Development sa UP College of Home Economics. Ngayong panahon po ng pandemya, ako po ay nagtuturo sa isang remote learning setup. So katulad po ng alam ko karamihan sa mga attendees natin ay teachers din. So katulad niyo po, ako rin ay nagtuturo. Mga 2 buwan na po tayong nagtuturo. 2 po ang klaseng hinahawakan ko. Yung una po ay isang preschool class sa UP Child Development Center. So ito po yung laboratory preschool ng university. Meron po akong 14 na estudyante doon ng mga bata mula age 3 hanggang 4. Tapos, so may 14 din po akong pamilya na kaugnayan para po matulungan yung mga bata sa kanilang development. Linggo-linggo po. At bukod po sa preschool class, nagtuturo din po ako sa kolehiyo sa mga college students na nag-aaral ng BS Family Life and Child Development. So katulad po nila, inaaral po namin ang pamilya at ang mga bata at kung paano sila maaaring tulungan. Po. So, simulan ko na po. Ano po ba ang outline ng ating discussion ngayon? 3 lang naman po. Yung una po is ipapakilala ko po sa inyo ang isang teorya sa pag-aaral ng pamilya. Ito po yung Family Systems Theory. So, mabilis na discussion lang po para magkaintindihan tayo sa mga ibabahagi kong mga konsepto. Yung ikalawa naman po ay ipapakita ko kung ano ba naging impact ng COVID-19 sa mga relasyon natin sa loob ng pamilya, no? So, ito po yung medyo bulk ng discussion natin kasi nga gusto nating malaman ano ba naging epekto ng COVID-19, paano niya naapektuhan ang pamilya. At yung pangatlo naman po, magbabahagi ako ng mga tips kung papaano po natin pwedeng ma-maintain yung magandang relasyon sa loob ng pamilya given yung mga impacts na ibabahagi natin. Sige po. So, simulan na po natin. Yung family systems po, again, isa siyang teorya sa pag-aaral ng pamilya na tinitingnan niya ang pamilya bilang isang buo, interconnected system. Ano po ang ibig sabihin nito? Ibig sabihin po, hindi niya tinitingnan ng pamilya bilang koleksyon ng iba't ibang grupo o ng mga miyembro, kundi isang magkakakonektang unit. So, katulad po ng isang mobile, yung sinasabit po sa crib ng mga babies, kunwari po hihilain ko yung star, gagalaw po yung buong mobile, di ba? Maaalog din yung bilog, maaalog din yung buwan. So, parang sa loob ng pamilya, kung ano man ang mangyari sa anak, apektado ang mga magulang, kung ano mangyari sa magulang, apektado pati ang mga anak. So, ganito po tinitingnan ng family systems theory ang pamilya. Yung pamilya po o yung sistema na tinitingnan natin, ito po yung grupo ng mga individual, saka yung mga relationship, kasama po yung relationship, tinitingnan natin yung relationship nila sa isa't isa. At sa family systems theory, tinitingnan niya po ang pamilya bilang isang intensely connected unit, emotionally connected unit. So I think nag-agree po tayo dito, lalo na po tayo mga Pilipino, we are very family-oriented. We are known to be very family-oriented to the point na ang desisyon sa buhay ng isang miyembro ng pamilya involve ang buong pamilya. Kunwari po, sa bata na magka-college, anak na magka-college, yung decision niya na course na kukunin niya, I'm pretty much sure may involvement, may influence may say ang mga magulang doon. Even mga kapatid, pwedeng may say sa course na kukunin ng bata, no? So, ganun po tayo ka-involved. Kunwari po, yung mga magulang, may gustong gawin, may planong gustong gawin, kinoconsider nila kung anong epekto nun sa mga anak nila. Kasi nga, kinikilala ng family systems theory na connected emotionally ang mga pamilya. Yung sunod na konsepto po ay subsystems. Basically, sa loob ng pamilya ay may mga small groups. So, yung buong pamilya, may mga smaller groups sa loob. Yung mag-asawa, that's a smaller group. Yung magkakapatid, that's another smaller group. Yung nanay tsaka yung anak, that's a smaller group. Yung tatay tsaka yung anak, that's a smaller group. So, may ganun po siyang konsepto. And then, meron pong konsepto ng boundary. Yung boundary po, ito yung humahati doon sa mga smaller groups natin, no? So, kunwari may usapan between the parents, no? Tapos may usapan between the siblings, yung magkakapatid. Hindi po lahat na napag-uusapan ng parents na babahagi sa magkakapatid. Tama naman po, di ba? May mga usapan din yung magkakapatid na hindi binabahagi sa mga magulang. Kasi nga po merong boundary between them. May humahati sa mga smaller groups natin na to. At itong boundary na to ay pwedeng open. Pag sinabi po natin open, dumadalo po yung informasyon. So nababahagi ko ano yung nangyayari sa mag-asawa, nalalaman na magkakapatid. Yung nangyayari sa magkakapatid, nalalaman na mag-asawa. Pero meron din naman pong boundaries na closed o sarado. So, hindi alam ng magkakapatid kung anong nangyayari sa mag-asawa. Hindi alam ng mag-asawa kung ano yung nangyayari sa magkakapatid. Kasi nga closed yung boundary. At I'm pretty much sure, iba-iba po ang experience natin dito. May mga families na open ng boundaries, may mga families na closed. Pero ang suggestion po natin sa family systems theory ay dapat balanse. Medyo bukas, medyo sarado. May mga kailangan na nalalaman ang bawat isa sa atin, pero may mga bagay na pwede naman natin i-keep private kasi mahalaga pa rin naman po yung privacy natin. Sunod po ay ang feedback. So ito basically yung paraan ng sistema o ng pamilya para magpasa ng impormasyon, tumanggap ng impormasyon, iproseso yung impormasyon at rumisponde accordingly doon sa impormasyon na natanggap nila. Ito yung daloy ng impormasyon, kumbaga. Variety naman po ay basically ang flexibility ng isang pamilya sa pag-adapt sa pagbabago sa environment nila. Ngayon pong COVID-19, isa po itong significant na impact o na pagbabago sa paligid ng isang pamilya. At kailangan po bilang isang pamilya, very flexible tayo o mataas yung variety natin para hindi mag-crumble yung family, no? Para hindi sobrang maalog yung family tapos hindi na siya maayos. Kailangan flexible enough tayo at maka-adapt tayo sa pagbabago nito. Mamaya po sa pangatlong part natin, yung sa tips, tutulungan ko po kayo kung paano idagdagan yung variety o yung flexibility ng mga pamilya. At ang huling konsepto po natin, ang mahalaga din na mapag-usapan ay yung konsepto ng equilibrium. Ano po ba yung equilibrium? Ito po ang goal ng bawat isang pamilya, balance. Di ba nga po, kinahalin tulad ang pamilya sa isang mobile. Kapag may nangyari sa pamilya, aalog to, pero eventually, babalik din siya sa pagkabalanse. na hindi na siya, na stable na siya, hindi na siya naalog, hindi na siya nagugulo. Sabi po sa family systems theory, ano man ang mangyari sa pamilya, makakamit at makakamit nila ang equilibrium. Parang maganda po pakinggan, no? Pero, sinasabi rin po ni family systems theory na hindi lahat ng paraan na ginawa ng pamilya para makamtan ang equilibrium o ang balance na ito ay tama o nakakabuti para sa mga miyembro ng pamilya. Parang ang weird po pakinggan, no? Pero papaliwanag ko po mamaya kung ano yung mga paraan ng pagkuha ng equilibrium na hindi pala tama o hindi nakakabuti. Papasadahan po natin yan mamaya. So yun po basically yung mga concepts na mababanggit-banggit natin. So sana po natandaan natin. Hindi naman po sila ganun kabibigat. I-explain ko naman po sila ulit kung sakaling kailanganin natin silang explain. So dako na po tayo sa pangalawang parte ng discussion, which is yung impact ng COVID-19 sa dynamics o sa relationship sa loob ng pamilya natin. So pakita ko lang po ulit paano po tinitingnan ni family systems theory si COVID-19. Okay? So ito po ulit si family, yung mobile natin. Ito po si COVID-19, tsaka yung mga kakabit niya na issue. Nung dumating siya sa buhay ng pamilya, naalog yung pamilya. Gumalaw, umikot, nagulo yung pamilya. Pero sabi natin, babalik at babalik sa equilibrium. Ulitin po natin, dumating si COVID, nagulo ang pamilya, pero eventually bumalik din yung pamilya sa equilibrium. Pero ulit sinasabi natin na hindi lahat ng equilibrium ay tama o nakakabuti. May mga equilibrium na mas nakakasama pa sa relationship sa loob ng pamilya. At yun yung pag-uusapan natin. Ang general impact ng COVID-19, alam po natin itong lahat. Di ko na po isa-isahin, no? I-explain. Di ko na po i-explain. Naintindihan po natin si lockdown, si social distancing, travel ban, school closure, work from home, unemployment. Lahat po ito ay realidad ng pandemya. Kung napapansin niyo po, walang nakalagay dyan sa general impact ng COVID-19 na family disruption. Walang nakalagay na ganun. Pero alam po natin na bawat isang impact dyan ay may epekto sa pamilya. Kunwari po yung school closure na lang, saka yung work from home. Dahil dyan, lahat ng karamihan sa mga pamilya natin ay magkakasama ngayon sa loob ng bahay. At dahil nadagdagan ng oras nila na magkakasama, panigurado may pagbabago sa relationship nila. Yun din po ang tanong ni BBC o ng British Broadcasting Corporation sa isang article na ginawa nila about it. Is COVID-19 changing our relationships? I'm pretty much sure po kayo bilang mga pamilyado, lahat tayo may pamilya, may sagot po kayo dito, no? At yung sagot nyo, pretty much sure nahahati rin to sa dalawa, katulad ng sagot ng BBC sa article na to na nahahati sa dalawa. Merong positibong impact saka negatibong impact ang COVID-19 sa relationships ng pamilya. So, iisa-isahin po natin to. Simulan natin sa positibo. Sa magandang bagay po muna tayo. So, sinasabi ng ibang mga eksperto na nagbi-build ng family relationships ang pandemic. Parang ang hirap po paniwalaan, no, na ang pandemic, isang hindi kanais-nais na bagay, ay nakakadulot pala ng kabutihan sa pamilya. At nakakatulong pa siya sa pagbuo ng relationship sa loob ng pamilya. Isa pa pong pag-aaral mula sa Harvard naman na nagsasabi na mas nagiging close daw ang mga tatay sa mga anak nila ngayong pandemya. So, sa dalawang article na to, paano nila binanggit na nangyayari ito? Dahil basically, dahil nga po mas maraming time yung mga pamilya na magkasama-sama dahil nga marami sa atin ay nasa bahay, mas nakakausap na natin yung mga kasama natin sa bahay. Mas nakikilala na natin sila na dati hindi natin nagagawa kasi busy tayo. Traffic pa lang po, di ba? Pagpunta ng mga trabaho natin, that's like kunwari 4 hours kang bumabiyahe, 2 hours papunta, 2 hours pabalik. Yung 4 hours na po yun, napunta na po yun sa pag-uusap sa loob ng pamilya. So, nagkakaroon ng stronger relationships, nagkakaroon ng stronger ties between the family members, no? Yung isa pa pong positibong impact na pwede nating tignan at i-consider na positibong impact is dumadami po ang mga webinars. Tama po ba? Ngayon po, nasa webinar tayo. Actually, nung panahon before pandemic, may mga webinars naman po, no? Pero hindi sila ganun ka kilala o hindi sila ganun ka sikat o na pinag-uusapan. Pero ngayon po, halos lahat may webinar na. Lahat ng grupo may webinar na. Dahil nga, at anong maganda sa webinars na to? Itong mga webinars na to, most of the time, ang mga content nito ay family-oriented or child-oriented para matulungan yung mga pamilya sa kung paano kumilos sa loob ng pandemya, paano asikasuhin ang pamilya nila sa loob ng pandemya. So, ayun po ay positibong impact kasi dati hindi readily accessible itong mga resources na to o itong mga information na to para makatulong sa mga pamilya. Ngayon, mas accessible na sila, mas available na sila para sa lahat. Okay, so ito po yung summary ng diniscuss ko. Basically, ang mga positive impacts na nakita natin based sa mga reports at actual experiences ng mga tao ay family bonding, nag-i-increase yung family ties, closer yung ties, and then institutional initiatives and services that are child and family responsive. Dumagdag po ang mga ito. Okay. Sunod naman po tayo sa mga negative impacts o ano naman yung mga negatibong impact. Unang-una sa lahat, stress. Naniniwala po ako na lahat tayo ay na-stress na ngayong pandemic. The fact na yung natural way of life natin, yung nakasanayan na natin na pamumuhay ay na-disrupt, natigil, na bago, nang bigla-bigla, wala man lang pasabi-sabi, yun ay nakaka-stress, no? At ang tagal-tagal pa niyang ganun. Tapos uncertain pa, wala pa tayong kasiguraduhan. Hindi natin alam kailan tayo matatapos ang pandemya. Hindi natin alam kung kailan tayo makakalabas ulit. Hindi natin alam kung sa mga nawalan ng trabaho, nakaka-stress, no? Dahil yon sa pandemya. At yung stress na ito, nakaka-apekto sa relationship natin with our friends and even in our families. Bakit sa family? Dahil nga school closure, dahil nga work from home, tayo ay nakukulong sa mga bahay natin at ang kasama natin sa bahay, most of the time, in most cases, ay yung pamilya natin. At lahat ng stress natin, kanino natin nabubuhos? Sa pamilya natin. At nagkakaroon ng effect yon sa relationship ng pamilya. No? Ito na po, yung sinasabi ko. So ngayon, nasa stress yung pamilya, may away, may alita, nabubuhos sa pamilya, nagugulo, naaalog yung pamilya, yung mobile gumagalaw. May mga ibang pamilya na ang way nila to meet the equilibrium, ayoko nang ma-stress, aalis na lang ako. So actually po sa China, nag-increase ang reports ng divorce rates. Yung application ng divorce rate in China, sa Hubei, China ay nag-increase. Doon, isa po sa mga areas na very affected ng pandemic. Nung nag-start yung pandemic, aware naman po tayo doon. Dahil sa kanila, online lang po ang application ng divorce sa mobile app. Sobrang dali lang po mag-apply ng divorce. Tumaas po yung rates nila ng divorce. At mas nagagamit po nila ngayon yung in-implement nila na bagong rule. Noong January 29 po nila in-implement, pero ngayon po siya mas nagagamit. Meron silang 30-day cooling period na tinatawag. Ano pong ibig sabihin? Pag nag-apply ng divorce yung mag-asawa, hindi po yun ipoproseso agad, hindi po yun tatakbo agad. May 30 days muna sila na cooling period kasi baka bugso lang ng emosyon dahil nga nag-away, nag-alitan dahil na ngayon sa pandemya lalo. Ang bilis mag-apply ng divorce at eventually kakalma naman, hindi naman pala talaga nila gusto mag-divorce. So yung attempt po na mag-divorce o makipaghiwalay sa mga miyembro sa pamilya, ayun po ay way ng pamilya to maintain equilibrium. Diba po, nagugulo, nakakaaway tayo, maghiwa-hiwalay na lang tayo. Yun po yung sagot nila sa problema ay para ma-maintain yung equilibrium, maghiwa-hiwalay na lang tayo. Pero alam po natin na hindi, although yes, isa yung sa paraan, hindi yun yung mga i-recommend natin na paraan kasi baka naman may iba pang paraan pwede na gamitin. So hindi po lahat ng paraan ng pag-maintain ng equilibrium ay nakabubuti. Baka kailangan mo lang huminga. Baka kailangan mo lang kumausap ng ibang tao bukod sa pamilya mo kasi nabuburyo ka na sa kanila kasi sila lagi yung kausap mo. Paulit-ulit yung problema ang sinishare nila sa'yo. So minsan, kailangan lang natin ng pahinga. Okay? So bukod po sa stress, ang nararamdaman pa natin ay family estrangement. So yung iba po nakakulong with their families. Pero may mga cases po tayo na hindi magkakasama ang pamilya sa loob ng bahay. Ito po actually yung sitwasyon namin ngayon sa family. No? Ako po ay nasa Marikina, yung tatay ko ay nasa Quezon Province. Most of the time, my mom is in Manila, yung kuya ko, Parañaque, tapos yung kapatid kong isa nasa Singapore, nasa ibang bansa. So hiwa-hiwalay po kami. Even before the pandemic, dahil mo pa po busy kami sa mga trabaho namin din, bihira lang din kami magkita, no? Pero nagkikita-kita pa naman kami. Pero ngayon pong pandemya, mas lalo pong hindi kami nagkikita. At ayun po ay yung ganung level ng pagkakahiwa-hiwalay sa pamilya, nakaka-apekto yun sa relasyon ng pamilya, no? Minsan hindi nakakalimutan na natin makipag-usap. Ako po aaminin ko na minsan sobrang nabibisi ako sa trabaho, nalulunod ako sa trabaho ko na nakakalimutan kong kumonect sa aking mga family members. At thankful naman po ako sa mga family members ko na hinahanap naman po nila ako At alam ko naman pong napapatawad nila ako na hindi ako laging ganun ako mo-connect sa kanila, no? Pero yun po, isa itong epekto ng pandemya dahil nga may travel ban, hindi ka makagalaw, hindi ganun kadalis bumiyahe-biyahe, hindi nababawasan yung opportunities naman to connect. Parang nagkakaroon ng losing touch with our family members. At next, nakakalungkot man malaman, pero nangyayari din po ang domestic abuse ngayong panahon ng pandemya, no? So, parang sinasabi nga na double pandemic, may COVID-19 ka na, tapos nagka-pandemya ka pa ng violence against children o violence against women or any member of the family. Okay? Even noong 2015, before the pandemic po, ito na yung numbers natin pagdating sa abuse. 66% ng mga bata ay physically abused and 59% ng mga bata ay psychologically abused. Psychological meaning may verbal abuse, sinasabihan yung mga bata ng kung ano-ano, popo ka kasi, tamad ka kasi, di ba? Naririnig po natin yan, nagagamit po natin yan minsan. Tapos may emotional abuse. Actually, ito po, nagugulat ang karamihan na emotional abuse pala to, na kunwari umiiyak yung bata dahil malungkot siya o nasi-stress yung bata, umiiyak siya. The way sa pinapatahan ng mga magulang ay tumigil ka sa pag-iyak mo. Tama na yung pag-iyak na yan. Nakakagulat mong malaman, no? Pero marami pong pag-aaral nagsasabi na hindi ito ang tamang paraan ng pagkalma sa ating mga anak dahil ang emosyon ay bago sa kanilang experience dahil bata pa nga po sila, no? Ang pagtigil sa kanilang pag-iyak, pinipuwersa natin silang tumigil sa pag-iyak, ayun po ay emotionally abusive sa mga bata. So, baka po nagulat tayong marinig yun, baka po nagamit natin yung mga ganong paraan. Pero ngayon naman po, dahil nalalaman na natin sila, dahil nga sa mga pag-aaral, ang gagawin na lang po natin ay hindi na sila ulitin. Okay? So bakit nung before the pandemic, ganito na po tayo kataas? What more ngayon na mas nag-increase, nasa bahay lang yung mga bata. Yung chances kung nasa abusive family na sila of being abused becomes higher. At dahil hindi sila nakakapunta ng mga schools, to sometimes even report yung nangyayari sa kanila o makita ng teachers nila na may nangyayari sa kanilang abusive, hindi sila natutulungan lalo dahil wala na nga, nasa bahay na sila lahat. Even yung mga social workers natin ngayon, hindi sila makapunta sa community to check if this is happening kasi nga lockdown, hindi din sila makalabas. So ang daming nangyayaring abuse na unreported. Okay po? At based din sa study na to, sa NBS-VAC, National Baseline Study on Violence Against Children, ang mga reasons ang mga structural drivers for violence against children ay poverty, unemployment, which increased ngayong panahon ng pandemya, and yung societal norm nga na ang paraan ng pagpapalaki natin sa mga bata, ang nakasanayan, ang alam nating pagpapalaki sa bata ay ang paggamit ng pananakit, ng pagpapalo, no? Pero napag-aralan na po natin, ang dami na pong pag-aaral na nagsasabi na mas may mabuting paraan na pwedeng gamitin sa pagpapdidisiplina ng mga bata. So actually yung binanggit ko po kanina yung sa China na nag-increase yung divorce rates, kasama din po doon ang violence or domestic abuse sa reasons nila for filing divorce. And isa pa pong mas masakit malaman, bukod sa physical and psychological abuse, ay nangyayari din po ang sexual abuse towards children. Okay? So, ito po ay nahahati sa dalawa. May sexual abuse. May 18%, ito po ay 2015 study pa ha, yung 80% ng kabataan below 18 years old ang naaabuso. That's 1 out of 5 children. Yung 44% naman ay online na-abuse sexually. Okay, ito po yung mga child pornography, no? So, navivideohan yung mga bata, pinapost nila online para sa pera. So, binibenta po nila yung mga anak nila online. Dahil pwede posible na yun na lang din yung source of income nila. Again, ito po, dito natin makikita, no? Na unemployed si magulang, wala silang pera, kailangan nilang buhayin yung pamilya nila. Ano lang meron sila? Meron silang anak, meron silang internet connection apparently. Anong pwede kong gawin between these two? Minsan yung iba, ganito po ang ginagawa. At nakilala po ang Pilipinas bilang isang global hotspot for online sexual exploitation of children. So ito po ay realidad na nangyayari at nag-increase ito ngayong panahon ng pandemya dahil tumaas din ang online activities, nangyayari din po ito. Ito po mga Facebook posts, posted po ito ni Senator Risa Hontiveros na very active on stopping ang violence against children, especially on sexual abuse. May mga ganito po sa social media, iba't ibang social media, Facebook, Telegram, kung ano pa pong maisip nilang gamitin, kung saan ina-upload nila yung mga pictures ng mga bata, pinagkakakitaan nila yung mga pictures ng bata na hindi dapat ginagawa. Ito po ay isang krimen, alam naman po natin yon. Pero naiintindihan natin na ganito yung paraan nila kasi nga ganito nila mini-maintain yung equilibrium. Kahit na mali, ganito nila mini-maintain yung kapayapaan o yung balance sa pamilya nila. Pero alam po natin na hindi yun tama. Sobrang alam din nila na mali yung ginagawa nila. To be honest, alam naman po nila na mali yung ginagawa nila. Kaya nga po may mga ganito na aware sila na may humuhuli sa kanila at may pasabi pa sila na kada 1 month or 2 months magpapalit tayo ng group name, no, para hindi sila mahuli. So aware po sila na mali yun, pero wala eh. Yun yung alam nila. Yun lang yung kaya nilang gawin at the moment to help themselves. Bukod po sa mga abuse at sa mga nabanggit, may nangyayari din, of course, na nawawalan ng miyembro ng pamilya siguro dahil sa sakit ng COVID-19. Pero posible din dahil naman sa ibang sakit. Pero ang mas masakit po doon ay hindi ka pa po makapagpaalam ng maayos. Dahil social distancing, lockdown, hindi natin nagagawa yung mga dating ritual na ginagawa natin, yung mga burol, nagiging online na lang. So nababawasan pa yung emotional support na pwede mo pang makuha, no, sa kabila ng ganitong mga experiences. At lahat po ng negative impact na nabanggit ko, meron po yung may effect yon sa mental health ng mga pamilya at ng bawat miyembro ng pamilya, no? Yung stress, yung isolation or estrangement, yung abuse, of course, and of course, grief. It affects us mentally, and mental health is a real issue. Mental concerns are real issues, very valid issues, especially in the time of the pandemic, na bago itong lahat sa atin, itong experience na ito. So ito po lahat ng negative impacts na nabanggit natin, no? Medyo masakit, medyo mabigat, at lahat, hindi naman po siguro tayo lahat na experience ito ng sabay-sabay. Yung ilan mas marami kumpara sa iba, yung iba konti lang, o yung iba talagang yung positibong impact lang ang nararamdaman, no? Pero we have to be aware na real families experiences different situations, and these are some of them. Ito lang po ay ilan sa mga alam natin based sa mga reports, no? May posibleng impact na hindi ko po nabanggit. Ngayon naman po, paano tayo mag-move forward? So, ito po yung nakita nating epekto pala ng COVID-19 sa pamilya. Ano naman pong gagawin ngayon ng pamilya para ma-resolve to? Una, keep ourselves and your family informed. Tungkol saan? Bakit po mahalagang matuto tayo o alamin natin ang mga bagay-bagay? Una, ano ba yung mga dapat nating malaman? Dapat alam natin, aware tayo sa COVID-19 updates kasi hindi po tayo makaka-adjust o adapt accordingly if hindi natin alam kung ano yung current situation. Ilan na ba yung cases? Ilan na ba yung may gamot na ba na hinahanap, or ano yung dapat nating ginagawa? Ano yung sinasabi ng gobyerno na dapat nating gawin? So dapat aware din tayo sa plans and actions ng gobyerno. At dapat sumusunod po tayo dito, no? Kailangan sumusunod tayo kasi if you want to protect our family, we have to listen to the people the experts, okay? And then we also need to know kung anong services yung available out there na makakatulong sa atin. Mamaya isa-isa magbibigay po ako ng examples kung ano yung services na pwede nating malaman o pwede nating kunin, mapakinabangan. Pero pakita ko po na sa inyo kung anong nagagawa ng keeping ourselves informed sa family, sa mata ng family systems theory. Una, we need to know how to manage the boundary between the family and the environment. Nabanggit ko po kanina yung boundary, di ba? Kailangan medyo open yung family natin sa mga information. Okay? Like katulad ng binanggit ko kanina, yung sa pag-aalaga ng bata. Kasi stress yung mga parents, lalo na ngayon na sa bahay na nag-aaral yung mga bata, no? Nagiging teachers na rin sila ng anak nila. At hindi sila sanay na sila yung teacher ng anak nila, lalo na kung wala sila talagang experience about teaching their children. Nasa-stress sila about it. And the way they relieve that stress is by binubuhos nila sa anak nila. No? Pinapagalitan nila, pinapalo nila, mag-aral ka na, makinig ka sa akin, hindi tama hindi mo naiintindihan yung tinuturo ko sa'yo. yun po ay nabanggit na natin kanina na although it happens, minsan po hindi naman natin talaga gustong gawin pero dahil nga dala na ng emosyon na gagawa natin, it can be considered abusive. At ang reason, most of the parents, ang reason nila is ito lang kasi yung alam kong paraan ng pagtuturo. Ito lang alam kong paraan ng pagdidisiplina kasi nga ito yung nakalakyan ko. Kaya ngayon, kailangan nating alamin ano ba yung ibang paraan na pwedeng gawin. So keep ourselves informed, no? And that's also increasing the variety. Nabanggit ko po na mas mataas ang variety, mas mataas yung chances of the family adapting. Kapag mas marami tayong alam, mas marami tayong impormasyong nakukuha, mas alam natin kung paano gagalaw, mas alam natin kung paano didiskarte, kumbaga, ang pamilya para kung maaalog tayo, mababalik yung balance nang hindi kailangan may ma-compromise o may masaktan na miyembro ng pamilya natin. Okay? And then we facilitate feedback. Yun nga po, yung pagpasok ng informasyon, iproproseso accordingly at re-responde accordingly. So, yung binanggit ko po na services, meron pong COVID-19parenting.com. This is specifically designed to help parents in the time of the pandemic on how to become effective parents, how to parent their children effectively from young children to old children, or teenagers, old children. No? And then, of course, positive discipline. Kanina ka pa po binabanggit, merong konsepto ng positive discipline. No? Hindi po natin kailangan maging abusive emotionally and physically or verbally sa mga anak natin. Merong mas mabuting paraan. At base ito sa mga pag-aaral. Meron din po mga webinars ulit. At alam ko dahil maraming teachers dito, share ko po ang DepEd webinars na meron. May positive discipline din po ang DepEd. Tapos na po yung first 3 episodes nila. So may 30 and 7 pa. 5 series po kasi ito. So baka pwede nyo pang attendan yung 30 and 7 kung September 30 and October 7 kung kaya niyo pong attendan. And then meron ding child protection session. So paano nga ba alagaan ng mga bata sa panahon ng pandemya, no? At sa mga teachers po dyan, ito po ay may CPD points. So ito po ay nakakatulong sa professional development nyo, especially for your license renewal. Okay? At ito pong webinar series na to ng DepEd, hindi lang po nila to ginawa out of the blue na gusto lang nila magpa-webinar. No? Ito po ay parte ng Philippine Plan of Action to End Violence Against Children. Nabanggit ko po kanina, merong NBS FAQ, yung pag-aaral na ginawa at nalaman natin mataas ang numero natin sa abuse sa mga bata. So kasama po ang DepEd sa Philippine Plan of Action para mabawasan yung numero na yon. Kaya po sila may pa-webinar na ganyan. And of course, na-mention ko rin yung mental health concerns. So we have psychosocial support services out there. If kayo po, kayo mismo bilang mga magulang o bilang kapatid, nakakaranas kayo ng mga intense emotions, overwhelming, nasa stress na pa kayo, hindi nyo po kayang kimkimin, may mga services po out there that can help you process all of those issues or concerns or emotions that you have. And that's very valid. Sa Pilipinas po kasi nasa point pa, hindi pa po ganun kataas ang mental health awareness, although nandyan, nababanggit-banggit na siya, no? May pagka-dismissive pa rin po tayo. Sinasabi natin, iniisip mo lang yan, o nag-iinarte ka lang, o kaya mo yan. May tendency tayong maging ganun, no? At minsan sa mismong kapwa-pamilya pa natin, nakukuha yung mga ganun. At minsan hindi siya nakakatulong. So kung kailangan nyo po na makakausap, valid po ang nararamdaman nyo sa panahon ng pandemya na naguguluhan kayo, nahihirapan kayo, hindi nyo alam kung anong gagawin nyo, feeling nyo lost kayo. There are people you can talk to. So there's UP Diliman Psych Serve, there's their Facebook page, there's the National Council for Mental Health, and there are different helplines, hooplines, and hotlines, which I'm sharing here. You can screenshot it po, or these are all available online naman din. You can just search it in your Google. So I hope this helps if you really need someone to talk to. Sana po na-screenshot nyo na kasi I'm going to the next one. So there are also medical services that could be done online. Check your local government hospital. So again, you just keep yourself informed po. There are people who can help you. You just need to know. Okay? So ito po ang very first step ko is to keep yourself informed. And baka meron din mga livelihood programs for those na nawalan ng trabaho. Baka po may mga better, alam ko po hindi madali maghanap ng trabaho ngayong panahon. So sana po ay sa paghahanap nyo ay may makita kayong livelihood programs na pwede nyo mapuntahan. Okay? So that's number 1. Number 2, establish certainties within your family or household. Ano pong point nito? Ngayon pong panahon, ang daming uncertainty, ang daming hindi sigurado. Hindi natin alam kung kailan matatapos ang pandemya. Hindi natin alam kung kailan tayo makakalabas. Di ba? Hindi natin alam kung may kakainin pa ba tayo bukas o may para sa mga walang trabaho. So, nakaka-stress po. Ang daming hindi sigurado. Feeling natin wala tayong control sa buhay natin. So, to give ourselves at least some sense of control, to take back our sense of control, let's establish certainties. Tayo po mismo yung bumuo ng kasiguraduhan at least para sa pang-araw-araw natin na pamumuhay. So, ano bang examples nito? Simple, bumuo po kayo ng rules o ng routine o ng schedule sa loob ng tahanan nyo. Maganda po ito ay nakasulat. Kunwari po sa mga parents na may mga anak na sabay-sabay nag-online classes, iniisip nyo, anong oras nga yung pasok ng anak ko? Anong oras ko nga bubuksan yung Zoom nito, yung Zoom ni ganyan? Ang dami pong nangyayari. At kung lahat yun ay iniisip nyo lang, nakaka-stress po talaga. So I suggest you write it down, isulat nyo po lahat sa papel, idikit nyo. Ito yung schedule ng asawa ko, ito yung schedule ko, ito yung schedule niya, ito yung schedule niya. Kung nakasulat yun, mababawasan po yung stress nyo. Space management or resource management, dahil nga kunwari sabay-sabay nag-online sa work, sa school, sinong gagamit ng computer, sinong gagamit ng pwesto na to, kasi hindi naman pwede magkakatabi kayo, no? Kasi hindi nyo maririnig yung nangyayari sa mga schools, sa mga meetings ninyo. So kailangan may designation at para hindi na kayo mag-away-away at hindi na mag-away-away yung mga anak nyo, pag-usapan nyo na po, no? Kung gusto nyo isulat din sa papel, isulat nyo sa papel. Task and chore assignments, ganun din po. Ang daming post na kumakalat, mga batang ayaw maghugas ng pinggan, mga batang ayaw magwalis. Hindi ko naman po sinasabi na lahat ipagawa natin sa mga anak natin, no? Pero yung punto po nito is, pag-usapan natin bilang pamilya, base sa mga schedule na sinulat natin, sino ba yung pwedeng gumawa ng mga particular tasks? Hindi po pwedeng inaasa natin to sa isang miyembro lang ng pamilya. Hindi po pwedeng nanay lang ang gumagawa ng lahat ng to, no? Hindi pwedeng tatay lang, hindi pwedeng nanay lang. Hindi rin pwedeng anak lang. Dapat po ito ay shared responsibility dahil lahat tayo ay miyembro ng pamilya at lahat tayo ay may nako-contribute. Of course, base rin sa kakayanan natin. Baka naman po inaasahan natin yung 5-year-old na anak natin na maglaba at magluto. Siyempre, hindi naman po. No? So, pag-isipan din natin. And kung may maisip po kayo na ibang innovations to lessen decision making, gusto ko lang po mag-share. Ito po naisip namin ng mga housemates ko. Hindi ko po kasama yung pamilya ko, nabanggit ko na kasama ko mga housemates ko. Ang dami-dami na namin iisip sa trabaho, pati ba naman yung kakainin namin next week, iisipin pa namin. Dati kasi, o-order lang kami dun sa cafeteria nung kung saan kami nagtatrabaho. Ngayon, pati yung ulam namin, iisipin namin, nakaka-stress. Nakaka-stress, di ba? So, ang ginawa po namin, lahat ng ulam na kaya naming lutuin, sinulat po namin sa Excel. Spreadsheet po, no? Nilagyan namin ng numbers lahat, 1 to, kung ilan yung ulam, 1 to 50, ganyan. Tapos, every Friday, bubunot na lang kami ng 6. O, bubunot tayo ng 6. Tapos kung ano yung 6 na nabunot namin na ulam, yun na yung pagkain namin next week. Ang maganda pa po sa spreadsheet namin na yun, nandun na po yung ingredients ng bawat isang ulam. So yung adobo may gantong ingredient, yung kare-kare may gantong ingredient. So kapag nakuha na namin yung 6 na bunot, copy-paste na lang po lahat, yung pagsasama-samahin, may instant grocery list na po kami. So even yung pagpasok ng Saturday, hindi na kami mag-isip ano pang bibilihin natin kasi nakasulat na, nakalisa na. Pag nababawasan po yung decision making na kailangan gawin sa mga simpleng bagay, nababawasan po yung stress. At kung mababawasan ng stress, tayo po ay masaya sa pamilya. Di ba po? Pag walang stress, masaya tayo. So, subukan po natin. Let's establish certainties. Ito po. So, these are ways to maintain equilibrium. No? Pwede pong ma-maintain ang equilibrium nang hindi nag-aaway-away. Pwede pong pag-usapan. And then we also facilitate feedback. So, kunwari nag-set kayo ng schedule, tapos na-realize nyo na o 1 week na try nyo yung bagong schedule, parang may problema sa schedule, parang hindi siya effective. Kahit na pag-usapan nyo na po siya, baka po pwede po nyong i-adjust. So titingnan nyo kung feedback, tingnan nyo yung feedback kung effective ba siya o hindi, and adjust accordingly. Okay? Huwag po natin i-impose na sabihin, pinag-usapan na natin to, ito na yung pinag-usapan natin, panindigan natin yan. Kasi baka naman po, hindi naman po perfect yun na pag-usapan nyo kasi first time nyo lang naman din po tinatry, no? So let's be willing to adjust. Number 3, maintain the connection within and outside of the family. Yes, we are socially distancing, but we don't need to be disconnected. Okay po. Again, iba-iba ang sitwasyon natin sa pamilya, pero kailangan po ay marunong tayong kumonekta pa rin sa iba. Baka may mga kaibigan tayo, may kakakilala tayo na estranged para sila o mag-isa lang sila ngayon buong pandemya, baka kailangan nila na makakausap. At the same time, sa loob din ng pamilya natin, baka naman yung mismong pamilya nyo, magkakasama kayo sa bahay, pero hindi pa rin kayo nag-uusap-usap o hindi kayo nagpapakiramdaman pa, no? So let's maintain the connection. Let's work on our connections. Ito nga po nabanggit ko na baka may mga estranged family members dyan na kailangan ng kausap. It will be a big help for them, for their emotional and practical support. So let's be an active listener and responsive communicator. Again, marami tayong teachers na present no sa webinar na to. So I hope as teachers, we also become listeners, active listeners. If we feel na may mga students tayo na nagpapakita ng signs of baka belonging pala sila sa abusive family, baka may problema sila na gusto nilang i-communicate sa inyo, let's try to listen to them. Okay po? Let's not just dismiss our students. Alam ko po, labas na yon sa responsibilidad natin as teachers kasi ang dami na, kayo rin po ay may sariling pamilya, ang dami nyo na rin po ginagawang preparations. Pero kung kakayanin pa po natin, kakayanin pa po ng mga puso natin bilang guro na pakinggan din ng mga estudyante natin, I really encourage you to do so. Okay? So again, you manage the boundary. Huwag po masyadong closed. Minsan, buksan naman din po natin ang mga sarili, ang pamilya natin sa iba. Buksan natin ang sarili natin sa bawat isang miyembro ng pamilya. Manage the boundary among the subsystems. And again, let's listen and respond accordingly. So facilitate the feedback. And the last po, this is my last tip. It's let's consider all kinds of families and family situations. Pag tinanong, usually pag binanggit po ang pamilya, ang naiisip natin, nanay, tatay, magkakapatid, kumpleto, okay, tapos okay sila, masaya sila. Usually when we imagine a family, we imagine a good family. Okay? And sometimes because of that, yun yung instant notion natin of a family, we forget that there are real families out there na hindi ganun yung experience, na hindi pala sila happy, na hindi pala sila kompleto, na hindi pala sila magkakasama. So we have to be considerate about that. No? Ito po, sobrang gusto ko tong quote na to ni Blake, basahin ko na lang din. Although the imagined family is widely assumed to be the norm, there are those which are distant, unsupportive, disappointing, and even dangerous. Katulad nga po ng mga pamilya na ina-abuse yung mga anak nila, especially online, sexually abusing them online. Those are dangerous families and they exist. And sometimes, nakukulong tayo sa imagined family natin na sobrang insensitive na tayo na yung kapitbahay pala natin belongs to a family na ganun. Hindi tayo aware na yung kapitbahay natin ganun na pala yung pamilya nila, no? Kasi feeling natin, lahat ng pamilya okay, which is hindi po totoo. Okay? Real families experience real issues, especially in the time of the pandemic. So we have to consider that. We have to be sensitive and compassionate and be mindful of assumptions that families and homes ay hindi laging safe havens of love, warmth, and acceptance. Okay? And as teachers, binabanggit ko rin po ito na baka may mga estudyante nga po tayo na hindi ganito yung family nila na love, warmth, and acceptance ang nararamdaman. Baka po all this time yung estudyante nyo na sobrang overachieving, sobrang involved sa pag-aaral niya, involved pala siya, akala natin okay siguro yung pamilya nito. Yun pala involved siya kasi feeling niya ito na yung safest space na meron siya. Yung makita niya yung klase niya, yung classmates niya, yung teacher niya sa camera, yun na yung pinaka-safe na space na meron siya. Yun na yung pinaka-tahimik na space na meron siya. Kasi after ng klase na to, babalik na ulit siya sa pamilya niya na sobrang gulo pala. Kaya pala siya sobrang bibo. Okay? And of course, reality din, baka naman kaya inactive, hindi bibo, hindi nakikinig, hindi nagpa-participate yung estudyante, baka nga dahil nagbibilong sila sa mga ganong pamilya. So hindi po tayo pwede mag-assume no, na kapag okay yung estudyante, okay yung family niya. Pag hindi okay yung estudyante, baka hindi okay family niya. We cannot hold any assumptions like that because wala tayong pruweba. But what we can do is we have to be sensitive, we have to be compassionate, and we have to actively listen to the people around us. Especially for teachers to our students. Okay? And posible rin po if you are, I know as teachers, we have a lot of requirements na pinapagawa kasi we have learning goals, minsan mandated by the school, I understand. Pero beyond our responsibilities as a teachers, I hope we always choose to be human first, to be the second parents of our students. Kasi naman po ang label natin talaga, we are the second parents of our students, so I hope we embody it as well. I know hindi siya madali, teachers. I know madali lang siyang sabihin, mahirap siyang gawin. I myself I'm trying my best to always make sure na I'm doing it. So, kapit lang po. Kaya po natin ito. So, yeah, again, manage the boundary. Huwag po masyadong sarado. Buksan po natin ang sarili natin sa iba. And to increase our variety. Okay? So, basically, may mga family setups din po na hindi sila blood-related. Like, kunwari po, in my case, I'm living with my housemates. I consider them as my second family as well. So, may mga situations po na ganun. And pwedeng posible na yung mga estudyante nyo nga, kayo ang mas tinuturing na pamilya. So, let's be sensitive about it. Okay po? Sige po. So, tapos na po yung discussion ko. Siguro final words na lang. Ang COVID-19 pandemic po ay nagsimula bilang isang public health issue. Pero dahil ang tagal na niya, pervasive na siya, hindi na po siya simpleng public health issue lang. Siya ay societal at family issue na rin dahil nakaka-apekto na siya sa atin. Okay? At meron po tayong responsibilidad bilang isang pamilya to protect ourselves, to take conscious actions to protect ourselves from the impact of the COVID-19. Hindi po natin pwedeng laging sisihin lang si pandemya. Kailangan po, meron din tayong ganung responsibilities to protect ourselves and our families and our children against it, no? Huwag po tayong mag-react lang. Dapat po proactive tayo. Let's take conscious actions. Like yung nga sinabi ko, keep yourself informed. Establish certainties. Huwag niyo po sabihin na, may pandemya kasi, kasalanan ng pandemya. Yes, may kasalanan ng pandemya. Pero tayo po bilang mga tao ay may kapasidad naman po tayong umaksyon. So umaksyon po tayo, no? At kung hindi enough yung pag-action natin, kahit ginawa na po natin ang lahat at hindi pa rin enough, we can always expect and demand services and help from our government. Bilang mamamayan po ng Pilipinas, tayo po ay may karapatan na matulungan, of course, ng ating gobyerno, ng ating mga barangay. So, let's expect help from them. Let's ask help from them. Okay? Bukod sa government agencies, of course, there are NGOs, may mga grupo din naman na willing tumulong. So, alamin po natin kung sino-sino sila. Po. So, ayun lang po. At sana ay marami kayong nakuha sa ating discussion. Maraming salamat po.
Much po na Teacher Edgar. Para sa ating mga viewers, napakagandang isipin na ang family natin bilang baby mobile na hindi porket ikaw lang yung may problema, ikaw lang yung nakakaramdam nito. Kaya it will be easier to empathize with other people, with our family members, and it will also be easier for them or for us families to share na yung natutunan natin and share the compassion with other people. So let's also remember to be proactive by staying informed, by establishing certainties, maintaining connections, and of course, to consider others as well. Hindi lang puro tayo, hindi lang puro yung pamilya natin, kung ano yung nararamdaman natin, yung hardships natin. But let us also remember na may mga teachers tayo na nahihirapan, mga students tayo na nahihirapan din. And of course, yung family members natin na yun nga, sabi nga ni Teacher Edgar kanina, hindi tayo sobrang sigurado kung gaano ka-open or gaano ka-close yung mga family members natin sa isa't isa kasi nga may boundaries. So, kailangan natin mas maging understanding pa kahit konting-konti pa kasi a little understanding goes a long way. So with that, thank you so much ulit, Teacher Edgar. And now, introduce ko na po sa inyo ang ating next speaker who is a bachelor and master's degree holder in home economics, assistant professor from the Department of Home Economics Education, College of Home Economics of University of the Philippines, Diliman. She has been teaching in the university for 25 years and has served as a college secretary. She is currently serving as college's head of the Office of the Graduate Studies in the UP COVID-19 Response Team. Welcome, Assistant Professor.
Hello, good morning. Okay. Is our audio on? Can you hear me? All right.
Yes po.
Okay. For a while, I cannot hear anything. All right. So, um, magandang umaga sa inyong lahat, and it is indeed an honor to be part of this webinar. Well, we have been in this webinar for an hour or so, and we may have exceeded our optimal attention time for online learning. So before I begin my talk, let us have some grounding activity first. No? So this will just take a couple of minutes. Okay, please follow the steps or the instructions I will give. First, let us find a comfortable sitting position. A comfortable position, where if you're sitting or standing up. Please keep your back straight, your head aligned with your spine. Stiff, not stiff, but alert. So a position that is alert but not stiff. Now, look around your area, focusing your gaze and attention on an object or a spot that is not your computer screen. Focus on that object or spot, seeing probably how light hits it or how it reflects light. Seeing the object with curiosity, noticing color, shape, texture, size. Just focusing your attention on that object or spot with open curiosity. Seeing it like you have never seen it before. Now let us shift attention to our breath. Noticing how air comes in and goes out, probably from your nose or your mouth. Just paying attention to your breathing. Air coming in, air going out. Keeping this attention to your breath for a few seconds. And when you are ready, shifting your attention back to your computer screen. And we are ready now to begin. Okay. So I hope you are now ready to listen. Let me share my screen with you so we can start our discussion. We hope to make it short. Wait, let me see. All right. So I will be talking about viewing this pandemic from a family disaster risk reduction and management perspective. My topic for this webinar may be quite novel for some, and we might not have considered viewing the situation that we are currently in from the family disaster risk reduction and management perspective. We are probably familiar with the RRM during calamities or as a government program. No, because all barangays, all communities have the RRM offices. But have we realized that disaster reduction, risk reduction, and management actually emanates from the home and the family? Families are not only the object of the national or perhaps your city's DRRM program, but families are key players in the whole DRRM framework. Okay. So this next slide shows the impact of COVID-19 families. Teacher Edgar has explained the impact on family relationships. So I'm not going to discuss a lot about that, but it does not only have impact on relationships, but on 6 key functions of families. Right? For example, the stay-at-home lockdowns have brought families together. We explained that. It has brought connectedness to us, but also isolation among some family members. Like Teacher Edgar, I also live away from my home. I live in Rizal, and my family, my parents are in the province. And it's really quite difficult because we have not seen my parents for several months. no? And we visited them after 3 months. And then a week later, my father passed away. And it was quite difficult for us, to get the pass, to go home and attend the funeral. So it's a double-edged sword. It can bring connectedness, but isolation, in some cases. Um, it seems that this quarantine has highlighted sickness and death, whether by COVID-19 or from other diseases. COVID-19 also has led to some unexpected losses in the family. We all know that this pandemic has affected how we provide for basic needs. And in these studies, for example, work from the Save the Children and United Nations study worldwide. No, we do not have lots of information and data on the Philippine situation, but this is a worldwide study participated by many countries. And this study shows that 89% of families has reported negative impact of the pandemic in terms of their access to healthcare, medicines, medical supplies. People are afraid of going to the hospital for checkups. So some, people with morbidities or with diseases, have reported escalation of these sicknesses. Okay. In terms of education, 40% of children from poor households said that they need help with schoolwork, but have no one to help them. And this might especially be true during this time, as teacher Edgar has explained, when remote learning and education has been brought to the homes. Okay. In terms of protection, worldwide, 32% of households had a child, parent, or caregiver violence in the home. Okay. And the pandemic situation has also resulted in temporary and permanent closure of some businesses and has impacted personal finances and even national economies. Families have not only lost income, but has diverted some of their family budgets to help others. Indeed. So, hindi lang pamilya natin, ang iniintindi natin, kundi pati yung ibang mga pamilyang nangangailangan. Now, these impacts highlight the nature of this COVID-19 pandemic as an ongoing and prolonged disaster. And the risks are high without proper measures. Now, to craft a comprehensive measure, we must look at it from a family disaster risk reduction and management, which emphasizes that we must not only manage the risks, but but to reduce the risks for the future. So hindi lang ngayon, para in the future, hindi na ulit ito mangyayari. Or magiging handa tayo o alam natin kung paano tayo tutugon sa kung ano man ang maaaring mangyari, sa susunod. The DRRM framework stresses that there is no such thing as a natural disaster. But there are natural hazards like earthquakes, storms, volcanic eruptions. While these hazards happen to people or families who are vulnerable, the result is risk, disaster risk, Nadi-disaster ang mga tao. Nakakaramdam sila o nakakaranas sila ng isang disaster. Now, COVID-19 is partly natural and partly man-made hazard. Partly natural because viruses occur naturally in our world. But its crossover to humans and its continuous transmission is a result of human action. So, now, what are the risks or the adverse effects of this pandemic? Okay. Adverse effect. Of course, we have health risk of infection. Not only risk of being infected, one of our members or many members of our families to have to be infected by the virus, but the risk of severe infection. Mabuti sana kung magkakaroon tayo ng infection, tayo ay mild symptoms lang or asymptomatic even. But we can never know how our body will respond to the virus. And then another health risk is transmission within the household. Not only one member of the household getting infected, but many members of the household getting infected. And worse, sustained community transmission, meaning many people in the neighborhood will get the virus, and we do not know where it started. We cannot trace everyone. Okay, so that means the transmission will continue to go on and spread for a period of time. And this may need more stringent measures like total lockdowns, okay, which of course have a negative impact on our social and economic life. So we have socio-economic risks from these measures, like poverty. A lot more people who have lost jobs may have been put in poverty. No? Education, disruption of education, and social protection, lack of social protection or exposure of children and family members to violence. So those are socio-economic risks, from this disaster. So hindi lang health, meron din siyang ibang risks natin. And the thing is, what we can do is to look at this more carefully, and families who are vulnerable, in three aspects: spatial and physical vulnerability, maybe socioeconomic vulnerability, and fragility from external support, may increase the likelihood that we will experience higher risks from this um, pandemic. Okay, so let us look at this more closely. Perhaps you know this already, so I'll just go over this. SARS-CoV-2 is the virus that causes COVID-19. The virus is present in the mucus and in the nose and the mouth. And the virus in the mucus is in the mucus droplets that people expel when they sneeze or cough. As you can see in this diagram, okay, when people expirate, or will people cough or sneeze, these mucus droplets get sneezed out or coughed out, and these droplets, may land on surfaces in the form of fomites, or it may land directly on the men, the mouth, ears, the mouth, eyes, or nose of other people, that will result in direct contact, and direct infection. Or these droplets can also be aerosolized, meaning when we cough or when we sneeze, there are not only big droplets but even very minute nuclei, that can stay in the air. So we called it aerosolized droplet, and just there is a call, for example, from the medical professionals to really consider this form of transmission seriously, because it can cause infection among others. So this infected air can be inhaled by other people. It can stay in the air for a period of time. Okay? So it can be droplets, and even these aerosolized droplets can even be expelled just by natural talking and breathing. So now families may be vulnerable, to risk. So these are the characteristics of families that make them vulnerable to this uh, pandemic. We have spatial and physical vulnerabilities of families. Anong ibig sabihin po niyan? We may be living in a house or a neighborhood with little space for distance and isolation. There may be lack of provision for isolating people, isolating members when they are sick. Kasi maliit yung bahay. There is poor ventilation in the house. So when you expel air, the air just stays there, and there is a risk of infection among others. Kasi hindi umiikot yung hangin, hindi lumalabas kasi masyadong contained yung space. Or Some families may have lack of provision for hand washing, kulang ang tubig, walang masyadong paghuhugasan. So ang mga bata ang mga tao hawak lang ng hawak ng mga bagay na hindi naman naghuhugas. So these are conditions of the house and maybe conditions of the neighborhood. When you are living in a very dense space, yung mga magkakatabi lang sobra yung bahay, na pagdaan mo, hindi wala man isang metro ang pagitan ng bawat isang bahay. Isang maliit na iskinita lamang. At actually, ang mga hininga natin ay ay paikot-ikot lamang doon sa neighborhood na yon. No? So these are highly vulnerable areas. And of course, if the areas have a continuous and sustained community transmission, that makes the space highly vulnerable for getting COVID-19. Now, not only physical vulnerability, we should not only be concerned with physical vulnerability, but we should also be concerned with socioeconomic vulnerability. Now, a lot of these factors have been touched in the previous presentation, but let me highlight some. Like for example, more highly vulnerable families are those families who have presence of high-risk members. There are members who have comorbidities, elderly people, people who have high blood pressure, people who have diabetes, of family members who have diabetes. So these are high-risk members. Also, family size matters. Okay, many members sharing the space and probably sharing facilities. Sometimes we have anong tawag dito, bathrooms, not only for one family, but for several families, okay, in the neighborhood. So families gather in that area. And it might be a high-risk area for contamination and for infection. Household routines and practices like sharing of utensils, sharing of clothes, or sharing of other personal materials. One towel who may have been used by somebody who has infection will be used by other members of the family. Pupunas doon sa kanilang mukha, sa kanilang katawan, which could lead to transmission of the infection. So these household routines and practices make families vulnerable too. And of course, lack of resources. If the family has lack of money to provide for basic needs, it may result in malnutrition, in poor nutrition, when in fact what we need for to combat this pandemic is improved health, and good immune system to fight it. Provision of protective materials. We don't have enough masks in the house or face shields. So we go out without masks, or we go around the community without masks. Or because we do not have enough money, we might not be able to avoid risky activities like going to work outside instead of working at home, which would require us to commute publicly, which again puts us at risk. Okay? Another factor that involves humans is knowledge and skills. Lack of knowledge and skills and poor values about health can lead to poor perception of how risky this virus really is and how to properly follow health protocols. Risk perception is crucial here. Some people, for example, think that when we move to lower restrictions, like from ECQ to GCQ, or from GCQ to MGCQ, wala nang COVID-19. Ay, tapos na ang COVID-19, wala nang COVID-19 kasi pinapayagan na ulit lumabas ang mga tao. Ay, hindi po ganon. Some of people also think that when they are exposed but they do not show symptoms, they did not catch the virus. Hindi po ganon. In fact, current reports of IATF shows that there is high transmission within the family, especially coming from people with mild symptoms and people who have no symptoms at all, or what we call asymptomatic COVID-19 patients. Kasi nga, hindi nila, wala naman siguro, hindi naman siguro ako nahahawa. Siguro lang, okay, sige, mag-inuman pa tayo, makipag-inuman ka pa doon sa kapitbahay mo. Sige lang, patuloy lang ang normal na buhay. Punta ka sa palengke, punta ka sa labas. No? Hindi ka masyadong nag-iingat. Ayun, patuloy na kumakalat sa mga lugar, hawa-hawa na po. No? So, people with mild symptoms or no symptoms at all can still spread the virus. Okay? And then, relational fragility. No? Teacher Edgar has explained about this. That fractured relationships can make families prone to disagreements, can lead to lack of support for each other, and can even result into violence inside the home. And another aspect of vulnerability is lack of access and mobilization of social support. Social support can come from extended families and from other support groups like churches. Okay, the church and other organizations who have gathered and given support to a lot of people, private individuals. But some people have lack of access to this, malayo sa kamag-anak o hindi sila malapit sa kamag-anak, walang ibang tutulong. Or for mobilization of institutional support like community programs. Maraming, sabi nga ni Teacher Edgar, marami namang programa tayong pwedeng puntahan. Pero meron ba, namomobilize ba natin yun? O naa-access ba natin yun? Or perhaps the community or the barangay is not responsive to the needs of the community. Okay? So these are some aspects or some characteristics of families that make them more vulnerable to the effect of COVID-19. Okay, so how can we help the families decrease the risk? We need intervention. And that intervention is structured within DRRM, within family DRRM. So para hindi tayo ang tawag dito, exposure to the hazard plus the vulnerability equals disaster risk. And the higher the vulnerability and the more exposure we have, the higher the risk we may encounter in terms of this pandemic. So the intervention, so that hindi siya matutuloy sa risk, is structured in DRRM. Okay, so what can families do? Okay, risk assessment. We need to assess risks as families. Disaster prevention and mitigation. So we need to have prevention and mitigation measures in our families. We need to be prepared. And we need to apply and implement our preparedness plans. Minsan kasi prepared tayo, pero pag nandyan na yung mismong may nahawan na, may nagkaroon na ng infection, hindi na natin nagagawa yung dapat natin gawin. So disaster response is very important. What we will actually do when we get infected, and disaster recovery and redesign. That is for the future. Okay, so let's look at this one by one. All household activities, family activities, personal activities carry some form of risk. Now, whether it is done in the house or maybe it is shopping or eating in the carinderia, eating in a restaurant, or having food delivered, events or gatherings, okay? Ang tawag dito, jogging or sports activities or any physical activity. Taking transportation, private transportation, or worse, public transportation, and going to work. All of these activities involve some form of risks. Now, what are these risks? These risks can be assessed using 3 dimensions. So dimensions of density, distance, and duration. Density refers to the number and the variety of people in the activity at one time. No? So, gaano kadami ba ang mga tao na kasama mo dito sa activity ito? Kung ikaw ay mamamalengke, gaano kadami ba ang tao sa palengke? The setting is also important. Saan ka mamamalengke? Are you going to go to the wet market or are you going to go to the supermarket? No, because different settings have different considerations. If the setting is happening in enclosed spaces with poor ventilation, there should be lesser people inside, no, to allow air to circulate. Okay? Before, potentially infected air reaches you and you inhale the air. So the higher density of people, the higher the risk. Okay, distance is being able to keep the minimum distance from another person. So, will the activity allow you a 1 meter distance from another person? Which means, if 1 meter distance from each other is required, there should be roughly one person per square meter only. One person per square meter. Yun yung area natin. And duration. Will the activity be done for how long? How much period of time can you do your shopping in 15 minutes, in 1 hour? O nagbababad ba tayo sa supermarket kasi malamig dun? No? So mag-hang out ka. Parang ganon. So we should see, no, the higher the convergence, kaya po sila bilog-bilog at magkakapatong, no, the higher the convergence of these factors, the higher the risk. So for example, many people without distancing, higher risk. And then many people without distancing for a long period of time, higher risk. No? So the more these factors converge together, the higher that risk is for that particular activity. For example, if we will assess shopping, again, I said you can shop in the wet market or in the supermarket. Supermarkets are usually closed spaces. Some supermarkets have high ceilings and good ventilation, but other supermarkets are very cramped. Wet markets or talipapas are usually in open spaces, which is good because the air can flow around. But the space sometimes is quite limited kasi maliliit lang naman yung mga talipapa. So you can see a lot of people gathering in the area. No? And then there are also a lot of talking in talipapa. Talipapas kasi magtatanong tayo, magkano ba? Bago ba itong produkto na to? Maganda ba ito? Magkano ba ito? Pwede ba ito ng 1 kilo? O paano ba ito binibenta? So marami tayong mga tinatanong, no? Doon sa tindera. So there is a lot of conversation going on and talking going on. No? Both doon sa nagtitinda at saka doon din sa atin at doon sa mga katabi natin na namimili. No? So that is a consideration, no, of density. But since talipapas naman are, usually separate stores for different goods, like isang tindahan sa vegetable, isang tindahan sa gula, sa prutas, isang tindahan sa mga ulam, no, sa karne, sa isda, no. So there is also lesser time spent per store. No? So you may not be needing an hour for a particular store. When inside the supermarket, we can stay for hours comparing products and looking at various products available to us. So in risk assessment, families need to assess each activity and the convergence of these factors for that activity. And of course, then we can make a decision how we can do this with less risk. Okay? Next, disaster prevention and mitigation. So we know all this prevention. protocols, no? So the prevention guidelines, we have stay at home, we have to follow all health protocols properly, like hand washing, putting on face masks, and now face shields, and distancing, physical distancing. So this infograph tells us, for example, how effective these measures are. No, like physical distancing alone can result to the reduction of risks to only 2.6%. So consistent physical distancing means that you are at risk for for getting the infection. You are at risk for only 2.6%. No? Chance. You have a 2.6% chance of getting the infection. If you put on face masks, your risk is lessened to 3.1%. And for eye protection only, the risk is 5.5%. So if you put all of these together, you have a much lower risk of catching the infection. Like masks, for example, there are studies. You know that with masks, even if you sneeze, if you cough, the air that is expelled around the mask, kasi lumalabas pa rin naman yung hangin sa labas ng mask natin eh. No, depende sa ganda ng masks, ha? The air that goes around, outside the mask can reach from 2.5 meters to 1 meter. 1 meter kahit naka-masks if the mask is thin or stretchable. So yung one line na cloth face mask na hindi several tawag dito, several layers, kunyari one layer of cloth over your face, and if the cloth is stretchable, when you cough, the air that goes out, the droplets, the nuclei that goes out of the mouth can reach up to 1 meter. So, kung maganda yung face mask, it can reach up to 2.5 meters from the face only. Okay. So, this is prevention. No? And of course, hand washing. And then, mitigation. So, based on risk assessment, eliminating risky activities or modifying activities, no, so that we can prevent getting the infection. So, yun nga, kung tayo ay mamamalengke, kung tayo ay isipin natin kung saan tayo mamamalengke, isipin natin kung paano natin to gagawin. No, kung gaano kabilis, gaano katagal, saan natin to gagawin. At kung tayo ay may tamang suot na protective equipment. Okay? And of course, the best prevention of all is keeping healthy and safe. No, because we can fight this infection even if we get infected. No? All right. So best prevention is you get enough sleep, keep a balanced diet, keep healthy, get sufficient amounts of vitamins and minerals. No, vitamin C and vitamin D have been used by doctors as supplements for the immune system. And there are studies that show positive correlation of these vitamins to quicker recovery from the virus. Okay. Disaster mitigation. Mitigation means measures to suppress or to keep transmission under control or eventually getting it down. So ito po yung tinatawag na flattening the curve. Suppressing the transmission. So there are two kinds of treatments, means, no, for mitigation. One is the pharmaceutical means, and the other is non-pharmaceutical. So yung pharmaceutical means involves effective treatment protocols. So giving the right medicines for those who are sick with COVID-19, no, yung tamang treatment sa hospitals, which we have no control of, and the vaccine. Yun yung best mitigation. Well, nakikita na currently na what we are waiting for is the vaccine, no, to finally suppress this pandemic. Okay, but the non-pharmaceutical, these are the things that we can do. This is our commitment, no, to suppressing this transmission. And ang parati po nating naririnig is test, isolate, contact trace. Yun ang sabi ng gobyerno. Pero sa nakikita ko ngayon na nangyayari, no, sa bayan na hindi bumababa ang transmission, parang mas maganda itong apat na ito. Sisimulan natin hindi sa testing, kung hindi sa number 1 is alertness. Be alert. Okay? Because testing comes later. When you get tested, you're already infected. And you might already have infected others. So number 1 is be alert. Always have the presence of mind to be aware of when you might have exposed yourself to risk. You have close contact with a sick person for 15 minutes. Did you encounter someone who seemed to be sick? Do you keep on doing high-risk activities, exposing yourself to people? Nakikipag-inuman pa rin nga araw-araw. Pumupunta kung saan-saan. No? Nakikipagbarkada. Did you go out to a place where there is active infection? No? Yung barangay na high-risk barangay, no? Tumambay ka pa doon para bumisita. Do you consistently fill out the health declaration and contact tracing forms in establishments? Ito po, narinig ko sa mga kakilala ko na, ay nako, nasasawa na ako dyan sa mga health declaration na yan. Hindi ko na yan fill upan. O maglalagay lang akong pangalan tapos ihuhulog ko na. O yung minsan kinukuha lang yung papel, ihuhulog nang wala namang nakasulat. Okay? Well, risk po yun. No? Risk nyo po yun. Kasi kayo po yun ang hindi matatawagan. No, pag yun po ay ginagawa natin. Kayo ang hindi masasama sa contact tracing. Kung nagkaroon ng infection doon, hindi kayo mapuprotektahan. So be alert, but not anxious. Okay? And then, if you feel that you are in a risky situation, you can back off immediately. Number 2 is isolate. When you think you have been exposed, you should quarantine or isolate immediately. Not wait for test results, not wait for someone who have had close contact with to get their test results. No, kung sa palagay ninyo ay nagkaroon kayo ng kasalamuha, immediately you should quarantine. Yun ang nagiging problema kasi hinihintay pa natin, hinihintay ko muna kung nag-positive yun. Pagka nag-positive yung nakakontact nyo, it might have taken 5 days or 7 days already. And remember, if you get the infection, you are infectious or pwede kayong makahawa after 2 to 3 days only. Nang hindi nyo pa alam, nakakahawa na kayo. So yun po, So bago pa kayo matest, kailangan nag-isolate na kayo. So do not wait for symptoms to develop. Do not wait for the results to be released. No, isolation and quarantine is immediate. Okay? Now, pag hindi naman pala kayo positive, then you are released from quarantine. Okay? Kung kayo ay negative naman, that is when you are going to be released from quarantine. And then, bago pa yung testing. No? So, the important thing is, you report immediately to the barangay so that you can get the help that you need. No? The quarantine and the testing that is available to you for free. Okay? So yun po, no? And then, of course, yun nga, we should participate in contact tracing and be diligent in participating in contact tracing. If you are paid a visit by the contact tracer, be open and be honest. Okay, so keep a list of people you had contact with, and whenever you go out of your homes and whenever you think you may have been exposed. Okay, next is disaster preparedness. So planning, what do you do when you suspect a family gets infected, or in case somebody really gets positive? Okay, so of course, you plan when you suspect something, you inform and ask for help as soon as possible. You get tested and you get quarantined. So in case somebody gets positive, so you have to make decisions. Can you be isolated in the house, although it is not recommended now, or in an isolation facility? So you should be prepared to go into isolation. Your planning allows us to act out of knowledge and not out of fear. Sabi nga ni Teacher Edgar kanina, kailangan ay kalmado tayo. Kung hindi tayo handa, doon tayo magpapanik. So yung preparedness, kung handa tayo, alam na po natin ang ating gagawin. Hindi na tayo magpapanik in case meron talagang mangyari sa atin. Diba? We will be guided by our right decisions because we have planned for it. Household and community transmission happen because people are either unaware, in denial, or careless, or maybe just don't care. So remember that the time is of the essence in this virus. Looking at it from a disaster perspective may really help in this situation. Diba? When we think of disasters like earthquakes or floods or storms, alam natin, no? We know we should act immediately before when we receive the warning. When we receive the warning, alam natin immediate action natin. Likas tayo or tayo ay maghahanda. We should also think of it that way. No, the warning is, did you get exposed? That's the warning. Okay? Is there likelihood that you got exposed? It's quite difficult because we have to determine it ourselves personally. So, yun ang medyo mahirap. No? Hindi yung warning na may signal, na binibigay yung pag-asa, gano'n. Hindi kasi gano'n ang signal dito eh. Ang signal natin is if we did risky activities. Okay? If we expose ourselves to risk, that's the warning. Okay? So, should you go into isolation? So, kung you will be isolations, you also need a go bag. No? So, kung sa disaster may preparation tayo ng go bag, dapat may go bag din tayo. Remember, you will stay in an isolation facility for 10 to 14 days. So, you should be prepared. So, alam niyo yung anong dadalhin nyo, no? Kasi pagdating sa bahay, kailangan mabilis kayong mag-empake kasi aalis na rin kayo kaagad. Okay? So, know what you will be bringing, no? So, you do not have to ask your family to bring something to you while you are in the isolation facility because then you will be exposing them to risks because the isolation facility is a high-risk area. Okay, and then your contact tracing diary. Sana meron tayong ganito that when we are meron tayong sinusulat na sinong nakasalamuha natin lalo na kung lagi tayong lumalabas. No, para pagdating ng contact tracing, madali nating masasabi kung sino lahat yung tao, no, na nakasalamuha natin na iti-trace nila. And then you need to plan for communication with family members, and of course you need to plan for funds because getting sick it entails money. No, loss of money kasi mapipigil kayo sa trabaho, and money of course to get for the treatment. Kung tayo ay nagkakaroon ng simulation like earthquake drill, naisip ba natin na magkaroon din tayo ng simulation para dito? O, di ba? COVID-19 drill for the family. In my family, for example, we had a drill. We had a simulation of what to do. For example, nung minsan, sabi ko, sige, kunyari na-infect ako. No? I live in my own house, but my brother lives near my house, and during the day the family is in my house. Dito kami parati sa bahay nag-stay kasi nandito yung internet connection. So during the daytime, andito po yung mga pamangkin ko, mga bata, at saka yung ibang members ng family. So marami kami dito. So halimbawa, sabi ko, okay, ganito. Halimbawa ako ay nagkaroon ng COVID-19. Paano gagawin natin? So una, tinuruan ko yung kasambahay namin kung paano mag-disinfect. Na-practice kami, paano ba mag-disinfect? Anong gagawin? Ano ang mga kailangang i-disinfect? No? Tapos, na-practice talaga kami. No? O kung ako ay may COVID-19, andito lang ako sa bahay. Walang pupunta sa bahay. So, for 3 days, we did this. Nandito ako sa bahay. Nandun ako sa aking area, sa aking room. Hindi ako bumababa except to go to the bathroom. Tapos, nakamask ako sa buong bahay. Walang pwedeng pumunta sa bahay. Yung mga laruan ng pamangkin ko na kailangan nilang ibalik sa bahay nila, dinisinfect muna namin bago namin inihatid sa bahay nila. Hinahatadan nila ako ng pagkain kasi we eat together dati. No? So, hinahatidan lang nila ako ng pagkain. Nakahiwala yung gamit ko sa pagkain. No? Tapos, tuwing pumunta ako sa CR, dala ko yung pan-disinfect ng aking disinfectant spray at dinidisinfect ko Inspect ko lahat ng aking hinahawakan. So we did this for about 3 days until we got used to these actions. No? And until the children were not scared and frightened anymore. No? So, yun, alam na namin kung ano yung aming gagawin. Alam na namin ang itsura at takbo ng isolation. And I discovered a lot of things there. I discovered that we have routines in the family, no, that can really be, that can put the family vulnerable, to this infection. And it's kind of difficult, really, for a person to go into isolation and to conduct constant disinfection in the house. It takes commitment, really. So, dun po makikita natin, no, kung, pero napagplanuhan namin kung ano aming gagawin. And then disaster response, of course, again, this is implementation, kung anong plinano natin. Pag nandyan na ba, are we going to follow community protocols? May protocols naman yan, especially about reporting, isolation behaviors, and certain practices that we need to do. No? Okay. Then disaster recovery. Recovery means what we can do after the infection or after the pandemic. No, this is returning to normal, quote unquote normal, after we get infected, so pagbabalik natin, or after the pandemic, so maybe in 2022 or 2023, that is when we can fully recover. The recovery may be physical recovery or physical recovery of our selves, no? Our physical health, okay? Or economic recovery, no? Recovery of our economic situation, our financial matters, not only in our families but also nationally, no? National recovery of the national economy. And then social recovery means, the resumption of our social interactions with others, resumption of school, resumption of other activities that we will do. Of course, this recovery requires perhaps long-term permanent actions, or what we call redesigning our activities to include the new normal of things. Like new normal, it should be easier for us to maintain hygiene practices. Yung hand washing, dapat hindi na yan mawawala. Wearing of masks when you have colds, might be a practice that is good in the new normal. So maging normal nang mag-mask. Kung ikaw ay may sakit, ikaw ay may cold. Kasi dati, kahit may sipon tayo, kahit na ganyan, ubo lang naman talaga tayo ng ubo na hindi naman talaga natin na tayo nagmamask. Well, perhaps in the future talagang we should, no? Really be wearing masks na, no? Even if there is no COVID-19 anymore, but when we have the flu, no? Or when we have colds. And then we should establish sustainable practices. So these actions must be sustainable, not only now but in the future, no? And then redesign. No, we have to think of redesigning the built environment. Now we know that certain houses, certain physical spaces, buildings can be redesigned in such a way that there are more washrooms. No, more washrooms. Water is always present, no, in buildings, no. So we should be able to maintain physical hygiene, no? And especially dun sa marami sa ating guro nang nakikinig, sa mga eskwelahan. Kasi ang kakaunti ng ating mga banyo at ating mga washroom sa eskwelahan, hundreds of children share bathrooms. Well, perhaps we should think of putting on more bathrooms, more washrooms on public areas and public buildings. No, so yan ang nakikita natin, and good ventilation. No, good ventilation for buildings. No, ito yung nakikita nating lessons ngayon. And then of course, redesign of activities and processes. No, how we can conduct our daily lives. And not only in terms of this COVID-19, pero sana isipin din po natin yung practices involving ecological, sustainable, and ecological lifestyle. Now, this pandemic is a turning point. It should be a turning point for us. No? Turning point sa atin para magawa natin yung mga actions na matagal nang hinihingi sa atin, especially in terms of the environment. Environmental actions, waste management, treating the wildlife well. Okay? So, yun ay sana ngayon ay pagkakataon na upang magawa natin itong mga bagay na ito. No? At mabago natin yung takbo ng buhay sa mundo. Okay, and lastly, I would like to leave you with a general guide on how families can manage the situation and their actions for better results. The goal here is that this situation becomes transformative for all of us. The positive transformation for our families and societies will happen so that that this positive transformation can happen so that we can rebuild a better world after this pandemic. This guide is based on the critical science paradigm of home economics. So ito po itong pananaw na kung saan nakikita natin yung buhay, hindi lang sa isang aspeto, kung hindi sa mas malaking aspeto. Sa pisikal, sa relasyonal, at sa bagay na pakikitungo natin sa ating lipunan. Okay? So, looking at this, at life, no, from the technical, the communicative, and the emancipatory aspects of the life world. So, makikita po natin na ang home economics at hindi lang cooking and sewing, kung hindi talagang tinitignan natin ang kabuuan ng buhay. Okay? So, first, there is a technical aspect which focuses on effective and efficient ways of doing things. Okay? Ano ang mas magandang gawain? Ito yung mas associated sa home economics karaniwan kasi mas maayos na, mas magandang pagluluto, no? Kagaya ng paraan nila Teacher Edgar sa kanilang menu planning. Okay? So, efficient, no, ang kanilang pamamaraan. No, so, but we would like to stress that first we should set goals. Goal setting is important. What do we really want to happen? What is our objective for these behaviors, for these actions? Okay, do we want to be safe? Okay. Is it to survive? Is it to become better after this situation? Is our goal just to go on? So, kailangan maliwanag po ano yung goal setting natin. Efficient actions also involve managing resources. Like, how do we stretch our peso while helping others at the same time? Then, of course, we need to learn about proper ways of keeping safe, proper ways of doing things, proper ways of putting on the mask, the face shield, proper distancing, proper disinfection. Okay? And proper ways of maintaining health. No? And then, communicative actions. Ito po yung nabanggit na kanina sa family systems. Kasi nga po, ang isang pamilya ay isang sistema. No? Na kailangan makikita natin yung kabuuan. No? So, this communicative action focuses on relationships and meanings and unity of action. So, kailangan kung meron tayong gagawin para dito sa pagtugon sa pandemic na ito ay sama-sama ang pamilya. Collective planning is very important. It's necessary. And for that, we have to have shared meanings and responsibilities, as said earlier. And when we do collective planning, we should also be able to deal with differences of opinions and how we put them together. And remember, sabi nga din, we should have positive perspective on relational issues. If we have relational issues now, we should have a positive perspective that this is the time that we can probably address this more positively. Okay, let us not lose this period that was given to us for greater connectedness. Okay, and finally, we do not live as an island, as families. No? Kahit na naka-lockdown tayo na parang ang pamilya ay hiwa-hiwalay o solo-solo, isipin natin na we are never an island and we live with other people, with the society. Okay? And we influence and affect others. Okay? And emancipatory actions involve um, factors. Okay? Factors that constrains us. What are the things that prevent us from doing what is right? Okay, some these factors may be beliefs and fears, beliefs about health, or fears of discrimination among others. External forces include social forces from outside the family, like yung stigma of being a COVID-19 patient, or government measures. How do we deal with this? Teacher Edgar said we should be careful on how we deal with our boundaries, how we can keep our boundaries open or we can keep our boundaries closed. No, wag na natin isipin yung mga sasabihin ng iba, gawin natin ang tama. No? We should close our ears on them, but we should do what is right to help others. Being freed from these factors involves self-reflection. Isipin po natin. Let us think about what we are doing and how it affects not only us, our families, and our neighbors, and the society in general. It involves positive ways on dealing with constraints. And again, I emphasize positive changes for the family, the community, and the society, not only now, for in the future. Okay? So, our ultimate goal for the RRM is a Filipino family that is empowered to manage risk and to strengthen their ability to resist, absorb, and recover from disaster for improved well-being. This means that the family is resilient to any disaster that may befall you. Okay. So, bago po ako magtapos, ini-encourage ko po kayo na mag-participate sa isang pag-aaral. This is an international study by the United Nations. COVID-19 and Family Life Study. So, andito po yung link. Pwede po kayong pumunta dyan at mag-participate sa isang survey. This survey is co-partnered by the International Federation of Home Economics and the United Nations and other groups across different countries. So para po mas magkaroon ng magandang solution, because the inputs from this study will be given to governments so that they can plan for better solutions for the futures and help us rebuild our communities and our country better. Okay, so marami pong salamat sa inyong pakikinig at sana po ay nakatulong sa atin. No? Hindi lamang para ngayon, kundi para sa hinaharap. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Assistant Professor Florenda S. Gabriel. Ang gandang perspective and napaka-enlightening nung talk no, na kailangan mas personal kasi natin maramdaman yung empowerment ng disaster risk. Talaga tayo participating our part, being socially responsible, and sana ma-continue natin yung pagiging pag-follow ng ating mga safety precautions like hand washing, avoid touching our eyes, nose, and mouth. Also, yung pagiging responsible natin sa pag-cough and sa pag-sneeze, na gumamit talaga tayo ng mga face mask or handkerchief or kung ano man yung para hindi lang mag-spread yung virus lalo. So, yun, lagi rin natin tandaan that you have to be knowledgeable to, sa mga saan tayo nanggaling, saan tayo pupunta. And before we go out and before we do things, we also have to remember to think about the density, the distance, and the duration. So, kailangan talaga natin pag-isipan before we decide to expose ourselves to these risks. So, with that, we will be asking you to submit your questions if you have any on our chat box, and you may comment it down below on the YouTube live stream. And our speakers, Assistant Professor Gabriel and Teacher Edgar, would be willing to answer them here. So, if you have any questions, you may raise your hand as well if that's We would like to feel like you are there and ready to answer their questions and just to give them a more comfortable feeling. Yan. So wala pa naman pong nag-raise ng hand for our question. For our 270 YouTube viewers, may we ask you to please participate in our question and answer portion to be answered by our speakers for today. So I hope you guys learned something. Kung meron kayong mga clarifications or reflections na gusto nyong i-share and mag-comment sila Assistant Professor and si Teacher Edgar kung may gusto kayong hinga ng clarifications or if they can go deeper on some topics na hindi masyadong na-touch and you guys want to learn more about them, you may comment them down below or raise your hands dito. May core team members, our participants. So yun, earlier we had a question that was already answered by Teacher Edgar if they can have the permission to use the PowerPoint, and I think Teacher Edgar already answered the question. So yeah. Anything else you want to clarify? You may raise your hands or comment down below. Yan. Most of them are just congratulating the very insightful talks. And I agree. I learned a lot, especially regarding the compassion, being more, being more aware of the things that's happening around us. Ayan na, nag-open na po ng videos ang ating speakers and of course our dean. Thank you, Coach Dean, for blessing our webinar today. Ayan, let's see our YouTube questions. Okay, we have a YouTube question from El Tango. Can we have a webinar like this? So I think ang pinakamakasagot is our heads. Our lead heads. How often or how frequent can we have webinars like this? Yan, while waiting for them. So, in my opinion, we can have webinars like this kung may mga mag-i-initiate. So, organization. Meron tayong master groups. Kung inyo, you're knowledgeable about something or you have family members who are helpful and yung mga may alam tungkol sa mga different topics na important talaga, especially right now. Kahit sino naman pwede mag-start ng webinars, what you're talking about. When it comes to the lead talks or lead webinars, may we please ask our lead heads to please answer.
Hello po. I think it depends po on the capability and the capacity of the technological advancement na meron po kami. So, maybe po around within 2 to 3 months po yung next, I think.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Bon. Yun, 2 to 3 months daw po yung possible na next natin na webinar. And meron pa po tayong questions from YouTube from Estela Arreglado. Paano po may paparating sa parents na bawal ang face-to-face? Teacher Edgar? Or Assistant Professor Gabriel? Paano daw po mapaparating sa parents na bawal ang face-to-face?
Ano po ang face-to-face? Face-to-face
Yes,
class?
actually.
Face-to-face?
Classes ba ito?
Ang ibig,
Siguro, face-to-face class, siguro. Gusto ba ng parents magka-face-to-face class?
tapos may follow-up po siya, ang ibig sabihin yung pandemic drill. Paano po may paparating sa parents na bawal man ang face-to-face, ang ibig sabihin yung pandemic drill? Siguro po pwede pong paki-clarify po muna natin.
Okay. Sige. Yung pandemic drill, yun ay drill namin sa bahay. No? Sa pamilya ang drill, kanya-kanyang pamilya. Kung ano ang gagawin natin kung sakaling may magkakasakit. So kaya sa pamilya namin, sa pamilya ko dito, nagkaroon kami ng drill. O ganito, kapag may nakasakit, hindi muna tayo lalapit, ganito, dito siya, dito kami. Pero ito ay kagaya ng Teacher Edgar, maganda na pinag-uusapan. So bago naman yung nangyari, pinag-usapan na namin sa pamilya. Ganitong mangyayari ha, hindi muna kayo pwedeng pumunta sa bahay. At tapos kailangan mag-disinfect muna tayo lahat ng mga gamit. So, kailangan kasama ang buong pamilya na nagpaplano para dito. Kaya nung in-implement namin siya, medyo alam na nila, pag tinanong din ng kapitbahay, kasi yung kapitbahay, bakit hindi kayo pumupunta doon? Siyempre, magkakatabi lang kami, no? Kailangan medyo alam din nila na baka akala isumbong kami na meron talagang may COVID sa amin na hindi nagdi-drill lang kami para ang mga bata, alam na rin nila ang gagawin. Yun.
Thank you po. Meron po naman tayong next question from Jethro Poralan. How would you go about convincing family members to follow proper safety protocol?
Again, baka naman kulang sila sa, ano ang maaari kasing dahilan kung ba't hindi sila sumusunod? Kailangan maintindihan din natin. Ito ba ay dahil kulang sila ng kaalaman? Baka kailangan natin mag-share information. Sabi nga ni Teacher Edgar, kailangan natin ng information. Kaya ba sila hindi ginagawa? Kasi may balakid na hindi nila magawa. Like kulang wala naman palang face mask o wala naman pambili ng face shield. Baka kung ganon ay mabibigyan natin sila ng paraan upang magka-access dito. Or talaga lang ayaw at matigas yun ang medyo mahirap, no? Paano natin kukumbihin sa taong ayaw gumalawa dahil walang pakialam or gano'n? Then perhaps, again, the first thing that we can do is to provide information that can probably open the mind of the person, no? That this is a serious business.
Yes.
And then
sorry po. To add lang din po sa sinabi ni Ma'am Flor, talagang isang convincing at motivating factor naman talaga ang information. Although alam natin ngayon na ang dami nagkakaroon tayo ng concern with information, no? Kasi may mga fake news na sinasabi na hindi naman daw totoo yan. Kaya minsan may mga hindi sumusunod ng protocol kasi may information din silang nakukuha na iba yung sinasabi sa information na binibigay ng ibang tao. So it's a matter of fact-checking po your information. Piliin po natin kung kanino natin kinukuha yung information na pinapakinggan natin. Again, yun nga po, managing yung boundaries. Hindi po lahat na nare-receive natin ay tama. So piliin po natin kung kanino tayo makikinig. At hopefully, makinig po tayo ma-convince po tayo ng mga tamang sources ng information po na ito.
Siguro na Teacher Edgar and Prof. Assistant Gabriel, kasi meron akong mga friends, nadidisappoint sila sa mga family members nila dahil hindi ayaw nila mag-hand washing na parang, okay lang yun, nag-alcohol naman ako. So, paano kaya natin mako-convince, especially yung mga parents natin, kung sila yung mismong ayaw sumunod or ayaw maghugas ng kamay, ayaw mag-disinfect ng shoes bago pumasok sa bahay? What do you think is the proper way of telling them na, Mommy, Daddy, kung hindi na po nadadala sa pa-smile-smile na Mommy, Daddy, pwede po bang makinig na tayo?
Sir Edgar.
Well, kasi we have information, yes, pero papasok pa rin naman talaga yung human factor, no? Na hindi ganun easily ma-convince at ma-communicate ang mga information na to sa mga magulang. So, show them examples talaga, actual evidences, actual family situations wherein nung hindi nila finalo yung, ang pangit man pakinggan, no? Pero ganun talaga eh. Hindi sila convinced ng basic information lang, you can show them what happened to a certain situation if they did not follow. Ganito po yung posible. Minsan kasi hindi sila nako-convince kapag hindi nila nakikita yung posibleng effect nung hindi pag-follow ng protocol. So if you can provide that, hopefully it's convincing enough for them.
Yes. Tapos, kasi kakagaya namin, my parents, of course, we have a store, no? And it took a lot of convincing for my mother to put up, ang tawag dito ay yung mga barriers doon sa aming store. At saka for her to be consistent in putting on mask. Nung una hindi namin siya ma-convince magsuot ng face shield kasi nahihirapan siyang huminga. For some things, no, we had to find something that works for her. Like a face shield na komportable siya, na face masks na so we had to learn ano ba ang ayaw niya. Okay? Ano ba ang mahirap para sa kanya? And we find ways to make it easy for them. No? So, yun, effective ways, no, para kung ano man yung, kasi kung minsan may unexpressed sila na unexpressed thing na I don't want to do this because of something, no, or because of it's difficult, it's not convenient, or other things. So we have to find out what those are, and then help them deal with it.
Highlight lang na lang po natin ulit yung sinabi ni Teacher Edgar kanina na communication pala po talaga is really the key to understand kung saan nanggagaling yung ating mga family members. So we have another question po from Myra Bonite over on YouTube. Paano po kapag in denial po yung family na nakakadanas ng problema dahil sa pandemic? At ayaw nila ng tulong ng kung sino po. Like us teachers, one of our students' family ay may ganong sitwasyon.
Ito po ay very possible, no? So nabanggit ko nga kanina na may mga families na closed ang boundaries nila. So ito po yung example ng closed yung boundaries nila. So ayaw nila maglabas ng impormasyon sa environment nila, sa mga teachers about what's happening inside the home. So ang hirap, so ayun po yung challenges naman talaga, no? If as a teacher, gusto mong tumulong pero hindi ka makatulong dahil hindi ka nga pinapapasok kasi nga sarado yung boundary ng pamilya. Wala pong madaling sagot para dito, no? Pero ang pwede natin gawin is kung sa tingin niyo po talaga may ebidensya po tayo, mahirap din po kasi mag-assume. Baka na-assume lang natin na may problema, wala naman pala talaga. Pero if we have enough evidences, documented evidences as teachers from our communications online sessions with our students, for example, we can raise this to the school administration. Actually, in the webinar I attended with the DepEd, ang sinabi din nila na bawat isang school ay required to have child protection units, no? Even though nasa bahay ang mga bata, protected pa rin sila even during the time na nag-aaral sila, kahit nasa bahay sila ngayon. So, dapat yung school nyo merong ganung certain unit who can facilitate discussions like this. Kasi since yung parents naman ay enrolled ang anak nila sa school na yon, to some degree merong pwedeng magawa ang school. So, hindi po ito trabaho lamang ng teacher, although I understand na as teachers we really want to help. Ito po ay pwede nating idulog sa mga mas authorities within our school, and if kailangan po, kung abuse po pala yung case natin, kung kailangan po lumapit din sa police officers natin for this, then we can do so.
So yun, thank you so much po, Teacher Edgar and Assistant Professor Gabriel. Ma'am, good day. I'm Liza A. Sorevega from Lemery. Tanong ko lang po, kailan ang tamang pag-
Pwede po pa iulit ng question?
Putol.
Basahin ko na lang po. Ma'am, good day. I'm Liza A. Sorevega from Lemery NHS Division of Iloilo. Tanong ko lang po, kailan ang tamang panahon na mag-undergo ka ng COVID test? Kasi mostly, iyong marinig mo sa iba kapag inubo ka na, ay may COVID ka na. Kaya kung minsan ay nakaka-stress.
Okay. So una po natin kailangan, meron ba tayong exposure? So yun ang importante. Have we been exposed to an infected person? Nagkaroon ba tayo ng close contact? Kasi kung nagkasipon ka, nagkasipon ka, halimbawa, nang wala ka naman, nasa bahay ka lang, wala ka naman talagang exposure, hindi ka naman pumunta sa risk activities, baka naman sipon lang talaga, no? So ang importante po, malalaman natin kung tayo ay magkaka-COVID kung nagkaroon tayo ng exposure. No, may isang tayo ay lumabas, may nakasalamuha tayo na may COVID like COVID-19 o nakasalamuha tayo na may sakit. No, nasa palagay natin, yun nga po, karayo lang din ang makakapag-determine kung sa palagay natin ay na-expose tayo sa lahat ng ating mga pinupuntahan. No, wala po diyang parang automatic rule for everybody. It really takes us to determine what we did and if we had been exposed. Then if we think we had been exposed, pwede na po tayong pumunta doon sa barangay. Just for, safety. So, para wag naman po tayong ma-stress at sobrang ma-anxious. No? Because anxiety also leads to, more health problems.
Thank you po. Yung sa mga nagtatanong po regarding dun sa content natin, our core team members will be the one to message you po regarding these. They will be answered privately po para the other attendees wouldn't be able to have access to them as well if hindi naman po nila kailangan or hinihingi. So, meron pa po bang any questions from here or from YouTube?
Parang may mga questions sa chat.
Here we have in this new normal situation, how can we determine or help those individuals, particularly the learners who experience violence or abuse in their homes since there is no face-to-face modality? Thank you daw po.
So yun, default dahil nga hindi tayo nakikita talaga, if in the event na may time pa rin na may live session kahit once a week, baka pwede nating magamit ito to have a check-in with their students na ask them how they are doing and kung pwede din na magkaroon ng one-on-one, kung kakayanin ng teacher na magkaroon ng at least yung advisor ng particular class, kung magkaroon ng one-on-one session with the students para at least privately makapagsabi yung student kung gusto niya magsabi. At kung hindi naman to, syempre hindi naman dahil live din to, nung hindi ganun ka-komportable magkwento nung nakiharap-harapan with someone, baka pwedeng open ang communication through email or private number, kung saan pwede magkwento ang mga estudyante about their situation. And again po, if you receive this information, supposedly your schools should have child protection units or student protection units available already. If currently po parang wala kayong idea na may ganun ba yung school namin, then you should ask po. Again, you keep yourself informed. Meron bang ganun yung school namin na child protection unit? And ano yung protocols ng school namin if I receive reports like this from the students? Dapat, meron po yung dapat system of relaying information at dapat po ito ay always confidential.
Would you want to add something po, Assistant Professor Gabriel?
Wala naman. Wala na po ako idadagdag.
Okay, but we have our last question from Maricel Abyon, marami po ang hindi sang-ayon sa pag-open ng klase pero napipilitan lang na sumabay. Ano pa ba ang implication nito at sino pa ba ang dapat mag-address sa ganitong concern?
Ang ibig sabihin po ba na yung pag-open ng klase sa remote learning? Kasi sabi nga po natin kanina, ang disruption ng klase ay nagdudulot din ng risk sa mga bata. No? Kasi may risk of disruption of education, kung mawawalan sila hindi sila makakapag-aral ng isang taon, ay may malaking epekto din yan doon sa paglago sa development ng isang bata. So kailangan tignan din po natin yon. Kung face to face, kung walang face to face contact, syempre wala naman tayong physical risk. Diyan, so okay yon. Maaaring may difficulties. Pero sino pong nag-a-address ng difficulties? So, well, of course, una ay yung educational institutions, no, who should be able to address these difficulties. Pero isa lang din po ang pakiusap ko sa nakikita ko dun, lalo na tayo mga guro ang mga kausap natin ngayon, no, na kailangan kapag tayo ay magsisimula ng face-to-face class, kailangan mariwanag ang papel ng mga magulang at ng mga guro sa pag-aaral. Like, what do you expect your parents to contribute to that education? Do you expect them? Kasi ito nakikita kong conflict dun sa mga pamangking ko na do they expect the parents to really be there while they are conducting their online classes, or the child to be fully independent? No? How did they construct their modules? Is it for the child to do them independently and not with the help of the parents? So it must be clear, with the parents what the school expects of them in terms of supporting their children in school. So una-una po ito ay nasa education na institution, and of course the parents, and the parents, the families should also be able to throw their concerns to the institutions, whether it's the public institution or private educational institution. Kayo pong dalawa yung makakapag-solve ng mga issues na ito. So teachers should be open in the same way that parents should be open to these issues.
Okay, thank you po for answering our questions, and thank you po dun sa mga nagtanong. I hope you were given clarity with regard to your questions, and hopefully marami din po kayong natutunan as much as I have learned. And with that, may we call on the advisor of UP Lidche, Ms. Nikki Jacinto, to give our closing remarks.
Hello? Hello po, naririnig po ako? Yes po, okay. Yun. So, good afternoon po. It is undeniable that the COVID-19 pandemic has struck families the most. It disrupted routines for both adults and children and has caused even more distress among family members. Despite this, families resorted to different ways of responding to the impacts of the pandemic. Common examples are spending time with their families, learning new recipes, renovating or rearranging furniture at home, or starting small online businesses. Although, meron din pong mga negative na responses katulad po ng ibinahagi ni Teacher Edgar kanina. Karamihan po sa mga dumalo sa ating webinar ngayon ay mga kaguruan o mga miyembro ng academe. So maaari po natin gamitin ang ating mga kaalaman at kasanayan sa pagtuturo upang maipaabot sa ating mga mag-aaral ang mga natutunan ninyo sa umagang ito. Lahat po tayo ay mga miyembro ng pamilya, may mga nanay, tatay, lolo, lola, tito, tita, mga anak at iba pa. Katulad ng naibahagi ni Teacher Edgar tungkol sa family systems theory, isang buong magkakaugnay na sistema ang pamilya. Lahat po tayo ay naapektuhan at kasalukuyan pa rin naapektuhan ng pandemya. Ngunit dala rin nito ay ang kakayanan ng bawat isa sa atin na makatulong sa ating mga kapamilya habang sabay-sabay nating nilalagpasan ang pagsubok na ito. Mayroon pong tips na binigay ang ating speakers. Very interesting po yung simulation na naibahagi ni Ma'am Gabrielle because this eventually led to her family members to being used to the simple practices of disinfecting. Sa ngayon po, We should probably think na lahat ng nasa paligid natin ay infected para mas instilled po sa atin ang safety practices. So yung mga natutunan po natin today, yung mga tips po na ibinahagi ng ating speakers, naway makatulong po sa mga kani-kaniyang pamilya o sa mga mag-aaral na tinuturuan po ninyo. Pwede po tayong mag-trial and error. Hindi naman po siguro makakasakit yon sa ngayon as long as we take into consideration the aspects of family vulnerability or family characteristics that our speakers have shared with us. Pare-pareho po tayong mga miyembro ng pamilya, pero iba-iba pa rin po ang mga pamamaraan na magiging epektibo para sa bawat pamilya. Kaya yan din po yung importance ng ating risk assessment na na-mention po ni Ma'am Gabriel kanina. So before we end, I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the members of the UP Diliman College of Home Economics. Special thanks po to Dean Shirley Guevara and to Ma'am Princess Meneses, to our speakers, Teacher Edgar and Ma'am Gabriel, to the Department of Family Life and Child Development and Home Economics Education Department. Special mention po to Teacher Carla Saamong and Ma'am Shelo Chua, the respected heads of the departments. And then to the Interactive Learning Center Diliman, especially to Ma'am Melody Briola, to lead CHE and our partner organizations, companies, and institutions. Thank you so much po for making this event possible. And finally, to our attendees, maraming salamat po for spending your Saturday morning with us. We hope that you have gained some insight on as to how exactly COVID-19 has been affecting the Filipino family relations and dynamics. So maraming salamat po muli. Mag-iingat po tayong lahat, may pandemya man o wala. Magandang umaga po.
Thank you so much, Teacher Nikki, for that. While you're here with us, may we also request you to please award our speakers. May we ask Teacher Edgar and Ma'am Gabrielle to please accept these certificates of appreciation.
Lead CHE presents this certification of appreciation to Mr. Edgar G. Belda Jr. in grateful recognition for sharing his experience on family situations in the time of a pandemic as a speaker during Lead CHE's event entitled Pamilya at Pandemiya, Effects of the COVID-19 Pandemic and the Relations and Dynamics of Filipino Families, given this 26th day of September 2020 held via Zoom. Thank you po, Teacher Edgar.
Maraming salamat po.
Lead CHE presents this certificate of appreciation to Assistant Professor Florenda S. Gabriel in grateful recognition for sharing her experience on viewing the COVID-19 pandemic from the Family Disaster Risk Reduction and Management, or FDRRM, perspective as a speaker during Lead CHE's event entitled Pamilya at Pandemiya, Effects of the COVID-19 Pandemic and the Relations and Dynamics of Filipino Families, given this 26th day of September 2020 held via Zoom. Thank you po, Ma'am Gabriel.
Thank you very much, then.
So again, thank you very much for attending the webinar on Pamilya at Pandemya, how the COVID-19 pandemic affected the relations of family and its dynamics. So with that, may we ask our attendees to please answer our feedback form so that we may serve you better in our next webinars. So you may go to our link, which you will be finding on your screens, /Pamilya at Pandemya feedback. So after answering this feedback form, you will be also receiving a certificate of participation. Once again, from the UP Lead Che, thank you very much and have a great day.